I'm hopeful. When you say confident or putting odds on it, it's, I think still a flip of a coin. But, I know that's a top priority for the organization and myself. So be laser focused on it until it's not.
That was John Mozeliak at the Cardinals winter warm-up talking about the current situation, then the situation, which is still now the situation with Nolan Arenado. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Yes, this is your daily update on Nolan Arenado, but there's actually kind of an update now. Bob Nightingale tweeted out this morning, free agent third baseman Alex Bregman still has no interest on a short-term contract and remains seeking a 6 or 7 year contract. Alex, this came out after late last night, Pete Alonso decided, you know what, screw this. I'm taking a 3-year deal. I'm just going back to the Mets. I want to play for New York. This is stupid. It's February 6th. I'm done. I don't want to be out on the market anymore. It's technically a multi-year contract, 2-year contract, I think, technically. It's really a 1-year deal. It's 1 year, $30 million with like a $25 million option on the back end of it. I thought that's the kind of thing that Bregman was going to be interested in because we saw the same thing play out a year ago where you ended up with Matt Chapman having to take a short-term deal after being on the market way longer than people anticipated that he would be. We saw the same thing with Blake Snell where he took a short-term deal. Jordan Montgomery took a short-term deal. Well, Bregman is one of the last guys holding out hope that he can still get a long-term contract. And the reason why this is important as it pertains to Nolan Arenado, T-Bone mentioned this with us earlier today. I want to give credit where it's due. If you're a team out there that's not going to give Bregman that 6 or 7 year contract, the Boston Red Sox, well, you pivot. And you say, you know what, Bregman, we're done. It's February 6th. We're a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. We're going to go ahead and pivot. It's our time now to go after Nolan Arenado. He becomes now, instead of the backup plan, the number one option for us. So if there are reports over the next couple of days that say, hey, progress is being made or talks are ramping up between the Red Sox and the St. Louis Cardinals for Nolan Arenado to make a move to Boston, I would not be surprised at all, given what this report is coming from Bob Nightingale.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, this Bregman thing has actually been a blessing in disguise for Cardinals fans if you're wanting to see Nolan Arenado gone. I'm still very skeptical of this because the closer we get to reporting to Jupiter and getting into spring training, the less I believe that Arenado's willing to go, but maybe with everything that's taken place this offseason, if the offer comes 2 weeks into spring training, he's going to accept this one. But with Bregman saying this, I think it makes it even more likely that the Boston Red Sox aren't going to sit on their hands and wait anymore. It's a matter of, look, if we want Devers moving over to first, or if we want somebody to come in to play first, we go after Nolan Arenado. I'm still just a little wondering with the Red Sox because of the first baseman that they got, that Tristan Casas. They still have him. And so if you go acquire Nolan Arenado, are you just in the same moment going to flip that first baseman, or are you going to keep all of them? So there's still, to me, a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through before this thing actually becomes believable.
Care. I just don't care about the Red Sox.
Well, yeah, we could not care about it, but they're not going to make the move unless they do this
I think they are. I think they're being silly right now. I think their manager wants Nolan Arenado, and they want to move.
We know all about what happens when a manager wants a player.
Yeah, but their manager is different. Their manager wanting a player is like when TLR wanted a player here. Typically, he got it. Typically, if he really wanted to go out there and do something, the Cardinals made it happen because TLR had that kind of sway within the organization. I think the only manager in Major League Baseball, you guys can correct me if I'm missing somebody here, but I think the only manager currently in baseball that has that kind of power structure within his organization is what they have right now in Boston with Alex Cora. Because that dude, when he wants something, he typically gets it. That's why Chaim Bloom is no longer there.
Oh, sorry, Chaim.
But hasn't he wanted Alex Bregman, and Alex Bregman's not there?
I think he wants a third baseman. And I think he wants a third baseman, either Arenado or Bregman. And I think the ownership / GM structure in place is saying, we'll get one of those guys on a 3-year deal. We're not going to give them 6 or 7. And so I think they preferred the Bregman route because he's just, let's be honest, at this point, a better player. You can expect better returns over the next 3 years. But now that they are finding out it's going to take 6 to 7, or at least they're holding out for that, I think they pivot and go with Nolan Arenado. I apologize, Alex. I didn't mean to be like, I don't care what you have to say. I just don't care about what they have to do moving forward. Maybe they end up putting Casas at first or at DH. It seems pretty clear to me, though, they don't really care about what this means for Tristan Casas. They sound like they would like to trade Tristan Casas. So if that's their feelings on the player, cool, man. That's your problem. I'm worried about trading Nolan Arenado, and if you guys are the team that wants to do it, cool by me. I think it's silly. They shouldn't do this. I think it's crazy that the Red Sox are interested in trading for Nolan Arenado, but whatever. That's a you
Not my
problem.
problem. Yeah, I agree, because I don't think Arenado makes sense for the Red Sox, because I think they're better off with Devers at third and Casas as their first baseman. But for some reason, they are all in on getting a third baseman this offseason, to where they didn't even tell Devers their plan to move him to first base. Devers found out through the media, and they were like, well, we'll figure it out if that ends up happening. I still wonder if they are going to wait out the Bregman market. I wonder if they're calling the bluff on Bregman of, dude, you don't have a 6 or 7 year deal, or you do have it on the table and it's in Toronto and you don't want to go to Toronto. We know you don't want to go to Toronto, so let's get back to the table. I think right now they're leveraging, but I think they're within 2-3 days away from potentially pulling a trigger on trying to go after Arenado, because I don't think they're going to continue to wait this out and go into spring training. I think they want to have a deal done before pitchers and catchers report, whether that's with Bregman or with the Cardinals for Arenado. I expect you're going to get news on some kind of plan from the Boston Red Sox here within like 48 hours.
I think this time next week we'll have a definitive answer one way or the other. Because I just don't think these teams want to go into spring training when pitchers and catchers are, I guess it's probably closer to 2 weeks, because the position players, I think, are 2 weeks away from reporting to camp. So within the next 2 weeks, I think you'll have some kind of answer on this one way or the other. And I think Arenado's probably going to be dealt. And I think it's probably going to be to Boston. That's all speculation by me, but it feels like that's kind of the way that things are trending right now. Alex, I did want to talk about another angle on this, though. I was listening to MLB Network the other day, and they were talking about the Arenado report that came from J.P. Morosi. Here's what they had to say.
That bat with that left field wall, pretty fun stuff to think
Look,
about.
the Cardinals' first baseman has gone to New York, Goldsmith. Casas was drafted by Bloom. If Nolan goes there, they want to move Devers to first. So it's a matter of them figuring it all out.
You can't open camp with him there. You make a move. So we'll see how that plays out.
And Fenway Park is perfect for him.
The reason why I wanted to bring this up, Alex, there's at least a chance that Nolan Arenado ends up being good for the Boston Red Sox. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think people in St. Louis would react to that? If Nolan Arenado goes out there this year, has 25 to 30 home runs, hits 280 for the season, is not prime Nolan Arenado, not top 5 MVP candidate Nolan Arenado, but it's just a really good, really productive player. Let's say he's closer to like Wilson Contreras type of production. Again, 25 to 30 home run power, hits 280, just a really good overall player. What do you think the reaction would be here in St. Louis if that were the case?
Frustrated. I think it's going to be frustrated at the Cardinals because, once again, another player goes on to have success elsewhere. And I don't even know if frustration is the right word. I think Cardinals fans are just numb to it now, that it just happens this way. And this isn't a young player that didn't get an opportunity, but people are going to look back at the Cardinals if Arenado, and I'll even throw Paul Goldschmidt into this because they said it, if those two guys go on to be effective bats, because I don't expect MVP level bats, but if you go on to be effective bats for a winning team, I think people once again are going to look at the Cardinals and be like, are you kidding me? These guys go on to have success when they get away from you? What is going wrong with this Cardinals organization?
I have the opposite reaction. I don't know if people are going to care, because I think fans are completely invested on the youth movement, right? I think everybody was ready for the youth movement. Now, it hasn't happened yet. So I think there would be some fans that would say, I don't really care if he has success in Boston. I don't care what Goldie does with the Yankees, because I wanted to see the kids play. I wanted to just see something different. And we can admit the Goldschmidt-Arenado era was a failure. That's what it was. And it really failed it really came down crashing in the last 2 years with the St. Louis Cardinals. I think fans would be okay if they just left and ended up having success. I just think they want something different.
That's where I'm at. I'd be happy for him.
Yeah, good for Nolan.
Good for Nolan. He wanted to go to a team that's a contender. He thought that was going to happen here. It kind of did for like a year and a half, and then it was over, and it just didn't work out for a million different reasons. He's part of those reasons, by the way. His production is a big part of what led to the Cardinals not having the success that they expected to over the past couple of seasons. Same thing is true for Paul Goldschmidt, frankly. But if those guys go on and Goldie has success in New York and Arenado has success in Boston, cool. I think what's going to matter is what happens here with Gorman. If Gorman stinks and that guy just doesn't produce at third base, people will probably then look to Boston and say, you traded that away
For nothing,
and got
probably.
nothing
Yeah.
to see what this was able to give you when you knew that guy was going to strike out 30% of the time and not hit for any kind of real power and there would be some defensive issues. Like, that's what we got in return. That, I think, will be when you have some frustrated fans, it'll have more to do with what you're getting internally than what happened elsewhere. But if Gorman comes in and plays pretty well at third base and looks more natural than he did at second base and hits 35 home runs this season because he got the extended playing time at third, and then Donovan looks good at second, and now you've got Nootbaar in left field and you're getting playing time from Burleson, maybe you're getting positive returns there, it's okay. This all came together. Now we like what we're seeing. I don't think there will be a whole lot of attention being paid to Nolan Arenado. It really is, in my opinion, referencing back to what you're able to get internally with your third base replacement. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube, as always. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL. That's where the graveyard chat is off and running today. They want Mizzou talk, Alex. The chat is asking for us to please talk about Mizzou coming off of last night's loss on the road at Tennessee. Every time I watch this team play, even when they lose, my expectations and my hopes for them in the tournament seem to go up. T-Bone's having the opposite effect with the Illini. We'll talk about both coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
The second half, that's when Tennessee was able to, execute. And I thought they ended up taking more risks behind the arc, taking quicker shots than they did in the first half. And when you shoot 60% from the three in the second half, 50% from the field, that's where they won that game in that probably first 10 minutes. I thought it took us too long to stabilize, and ultimately we did fight back, and that's what I'm proud of the most.
That was Dennis Gates, Mizzou head coach, last night after their loss, 85-81 on the road at Tennessee. Tennessee's amazing. Let's say that on the front end. That's a really good basketball team. But if you had told me going into that game that Missouri would finish the game with three turnovers, they would score 81 points, and they would finish the game 12 for 30, so 40% from beyond the arc, I would have told you I think they won. They might have won by 10 points. Because I just didn't think Tennessee was capable of winning that kind of an up-tempo game. It was the opposite. Missouri got off to a really nice lead, and at halftime, I texted you guys, that's one of the best halves that I've seen Missouri play all season long. They were up 34-28 at the half, and I thought they were just clearly the better team in the first half of that game. And then in the second half, Tennessee made every possible adjustment that you can against Mizzou. They handled the pressure much better. They got quicker shots off, and then they just started making all of their threes. That is a team that on the season is shooting like 30% from beyond the arc. They went 10 for 15 from beyond the arc in that game. And if you get that kind of hot, you could beat any team in the country, even if you weren't Tennessee. If that was, I don't know, the worst team in the SEC, if that was Vandy, for example, and they're not terrible, but nobody in the SEC is really that bad. They would have beat Mizzou last night, shooting that well from beyond the arc. Alex, every time that I watch Mizzou, like they should not drop in the rankings based on that loss. Every time that I watch Mizzou recently, I leave thinking to myself, they could go even further than what I had previously expected. Like, it feels like every game that I witness, I'm like, oh, yeah, I previously thought they could make it to the second round. Now I think they can get to the Sweet 16. And then I thought they could get to the Sweet 16, and now we're talking the Elite 8. I think this team can
to the
Final Four?
I think this team can make it to the Final Four. I don't know that they will. It will depend on their draw, and we know that the NCAA tournament can be a bit of a crapshoot when it's one and done. Like,
Mizzou
weird
sucks against
stuff
15
happens.
seeds.
But
Don't we all?
this is an excellent basketball team. And I'm not overstating things there. They're unbelievably deep. Last night, Ant Robinson, one of their three most talented players on the team, played all of 6 minutes because of foul trouble. It's his own fault. No, not blaming the refs or anything, but he goes out there, gets 2 quick fouls in the first half, another 2 quick fouls in the second half, has 0 points, 0 rebounds, does basically nothing for them. And as a result, they've got T.O. Barrett, a freshman who's played 30 minutes in all of conference play, literally the entirety of conference play. He's taken the biggest shot of the game. Mark Mitchell, who is probably their most talented player, had a terrible night, did not make a field goal in the game, and yet they went on the road against a legit top 5 team, a team that absolutely has Final Four aspirations. They lost by 4. This team's really good, man, and every time I witness them, I just think more and more they're going to go on a run in this year's tournament.
I thought after the first half I was going to be the only person on the show that thought Mizzou actually could beat Tennessee, and I was going to celebrate that. And then, of course, it went down pretty quick. But to me, it went down because – and not even went down, but you were still in there. Like, what was the largest lead that Tennessee had in that second half? I think it was up to like 11 points.
Yeah, something like that.
And they drove it back to lose by 4 to where you were legitimately coming back in that basketball game. To me, there were 2 things. Caleb Grill, Tennessee did a phenomenal job of just eliminating him from the 3-point shot in the second half. And Mark Mitchell went over. And you struggled from the free throw line. Like, areas like that, I can look at in the game and say, okay, I know why Mizzou didn't lose. And in another game, I don't know if that happens again. To where last year, every time they'd play an SEC game, it's like, oh, I know why they're losing. This team doesn't have any talent that can find ways to win.
Yeah, I mean, they went 0 for an SEC play last year.
This one has, you mentioned Ant Robinson. You talk about Mark Mitchell going 0 for. You mentioned Caleb Grill's ability to just get shut down from the 3-point line. Are there weaknesses with Mizzou? Probably.
Yeah,
but
there are.
Man, like watching them climb back into that basketball game with everything that we just pointed out in the second half, to where typically this team's fine from the free throw line. Mark Mitchell's always an impact player, and Caleb Grill always finds ways to get shots off. This was you went up against a buzzsaw, and you lost by 4, which is impressive to me. Final Four is a little lofty, but I'm like an Elite 8 right now.
It's not expectations. I want to say that. Like, my expectations, this team's got to get to the second weekend of the tournament. That's my expectation.
So win 2 rounds?
Yeah, you win in the round of 64, win in the round of 32, you make it to the Sweet 16.
And then let's ride. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, from there, we'll see what happens. But that should be the expectation for them right now. You play to your seed, effectively. beyond that, it's a crapshoot. Who knows? It's about the matchups, all that different stuff. But this is a team that if they get to the Sweet 16, there's a real chance that we'll be picking them to get to the Elite Eight. And same thing from the Elite Eight. They'll be every bit as good because if you can go head-to-head against Florida and against Tennessee, against Mississippi State, that's the level of threat that you're going to be going up against in the second round and then into the Sweet 16. Those are the kinds of teams that you'll be seeing there. Hell, Tennessee's better than the teams that you'll be seeing in some of those rounds. They're a 1 seed right now. So, yeah, this weekend, they're going up against Texas A&M, another top 10 team. This SEC gauntlet is absurd, what they're going up against week to week right now, day to day, honestly. But I think they'll beat Texas A&M, or at least they'll have a really good chance to do so at home. And then after that, you got Oklahoma, Georgia. Those are 2 of the lesser teams in the SEC. You got to take care of business there. But, man, they might get a double bye in the SEC tournament. And if you're one of those teams that's getting a double bye, top 4 in the SEC for the season, you're probably looking at a top 4-ish seed in the NCAA tournament. And by then, yeah, playing to your seed means getting to the Sweet 16. All right, so I liked what we saw from Mizzou last night, and it made me more optimistic about what they can do in the NCAA tournament. T-Bone, your Illini played last night.
Did they?
Against Rutgers, and it didn't go so well. Before we hear your thoughts on the game, let's go ahead and take a listen to what Brad Underwood, Illini head basketball coach, had to say after that one.
It's awful. This shows where our effort was tonight. I mean, it was I don't know, 10-2 at one time or something, 12-4. It was never even close early. We shot shots the first 6 minutes of the game and never went. And Merez had 9 at half. They made all the hustle plays, and really disappointing when you're one of the top rebounding teams in the country, if not the top rebounding team. And I don't know where we're at going in, but it just shows the hustle.
Only thing we needed was
He was talking about rebounding. That's what that whole quote was about, was just like the hustle, rebounding, all of that different stuff. Illinois just got outplayed last night, just flat out outplayed by Rutgers, which is not good because Rutgers would be the worst team in the SEC.
Hey. Rutgers has got some good young freshmen on that team. They'd been hurt.
Sure.
They just came back. It's a little unfair we didn't have
It's not an NCAA tournament team. You lost to a team that's going to miss the NCAA tournament last night. That's what happened.
check standings for Rutgers basketball. Oh, not ranked.
They're terrible. Illinois should be a better team than what we saw last night, but they have now lost 4 of their last 6 games. And T-Bone, you said earlier today, could be 5 out of 6, depending. They just played really, really well in that second half, but it took them a while against Ohio State. What's going on with your Illini right now? Are these legitimate causes for concern or just a blip on the radar?
Oh, it's major causes for concern.
Okay.
You watch Mizzou basketball and you go, man, we could be an Elite Eight team. Oh, man, we could be a Final Four team. I watch Illinois basketball right now and go, my God, they're not going to make it out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. They're terrible right now. And they're shooting themselves in the foot. And it comes down to, I agree with what Underwood said last night. They didn't come out with a great effort in last night's game. Now, they've been dealing with some illness that's gone through the team, but that's no excuse for this roster. They shoot the three-point shot at a really high clip. And what I mean by that is attempts. They shoot a ton of three-point shots in basketball games. They suck at making them. They could have built a house last night with the bricks.
That feels like poor coaching. And Brad Underwood's not a bad coach. I don't understand what they're doing.
Well, I don't know what to make of it because what's been going on lately, and you mentioned that Ohio State game. They should have lost the Ohio State game this past weekend. It was a lot like what the first half was last night, where it was 2 for 17 was Illinois from three-point range last night. 51% of their shots in the first half were from three-point range, and they were 2 of 17.
Jeez.
And then they go into the second half. I think Underwood lights a little fire under that squad and says, guys, we cannot keep throwing up these bricks. We have got to get to the rim. And that keeps happening consistently. That has been the theme over the last 8 games. And what the Illini have lost 5 of 8 is they come out. I think Underwood wants them to get to the rim. I don't know if this is coaching. And I think they're settling for three-point shots because they're open. Right? It's the classic.
Well, there's a reason why you're open.
Exactly. It's the classic, hey, we're falling into their trap. We should quit shooting this damn shot. But Illinois keeps falling for them. And it's been the theme over the last 8 games. Now, when they get hot and they make them, they blow teams out. Like when I was at the Indiana game, they couldn't miss from three-point range. But most of the time they're not. They fall behind in the first half, and then they're so far behind in the first half, even a great second half's not enough. I thought they played pretty well in the second half last night. Wasn't enough because Rutgers kicked the crap out of you in the first half because you were settling for three-point shots.
It's just such a weird team, man. They shoot more threes than anybody in the conference, and they make them at a lower rate than anybody in the conference. That doesn't make sense. Like, that's...
And they're the best rebounding team in the country. Like he mentioned, rebound. They are truly the best rebounding team in the country by a rebound margin.
So what are we doing here? none of that. Like, your success is driving to the bucket and getting to the foul line as a result of that. I don't understand. I don't understand the plan here. So if they can't figure that out, they play at an unbelievable tempo. I like the style of game, like the speed at which they play. And Yakachonis, I think, is such a fun player to watch, but there are moments, especially lately, where it just doesn't look right with him. I don't know, man. I don't get this team.
They should be better because I think they've got 3 NBAers on their team. They got Yakachonis, who did not have a good game last night. Will Riley, who's been starting to play better of late. He willed them back in that game the second half late last night. And then I think Isevic is a guy that's going to eventually be in the league. He probably needs more seasoning, but big man that can shoot the ball, defended the rim pretty well last night. Now, he rolled his ankle. We'll see what his status is moving forward. It should be better. And I don't know what happened because they had an identity early on in the year. And it was a lot of the three-point shooting still, but it was more getting to the bucket. And now they're abandoning that. I think now they've gotten to the point where they're like, well, we can still chuck up these threes because, hey, we get these rebounds a lot. We're one of the best rebounding teams in the country. That's not a model to live off of. And defensively, they've been very lackluster over the last couple of games as well.
There are 364 teams in college basketball. They are 314th in three-point shooting percentage.
That's a slippery slope to sit there and say, we'll figure it out at the three-point shooting team. We'll just keep putting them up.
You're not a shooting team.
No.
At some point, you just have to come to terms with what you are and what you are not. And so now it's on them to figure this thing out because we're getting towards the end of the season. Now we're into mid-February. You've got almost exactly 1 month left in the Big Ten schedule.
I think they got 8 games left.
You have 8 games of runway here. And the stretch at the end of this thing, man, Duke, Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan State.
Yeah.
That is not going to be an easy stretch going into the Big Ten tournament. You basically have the next 2 games to be able to work with things. And UCLA's frisky. They're a pretty good team as well. Illinois is at risk of falling further and further down the line, the seeding that they want to be. They'll get to the tournament. They're going to get in. But where they end up seeded and what the expectations are once you get in, this could end up being a 7 or an 8 seed, which is a far cry from what we expected when you entered Big Ten play. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646. That's the Air Comfort Service text line for any of your questions. We're going to talk with our friend Joey Vitale coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they take on the Florida Panthers. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then puck drop at 7 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
We're calling an audible. We'll talk to Joey Vitale a little later on, but we got to talk about the Super Bowl, Alex. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Super Bowl coming up in just a few days. Chiefs a 1-point favorite against the Eagles right now. That line has moved a little bit in favor of the Eagles. We'll see if it actually ends up jumping over to the Eagles or if it goes to a pick-em, but there's been some thought that that might happen. You'll be able to hear, by the way, the Super Bowl right here on 101 ESPN on Sunday. So if you're driving around throughout the day, feel free to throw on 101 ESPN. We'll have pregame coverage for that one starting at 1 o'clock. Kickoff, of course, is at 5:30. Again, Chiefs versus Eagles right here on 101 ESPN on Sunday. Alex, I feel like there's been a lot of conversation going into this game about the three-peat, right? What happens if the Chiefs win? Where do they go down? And we'll talk certainly about that a little bit. But I do want to talk about what I think people are considering to be the weakness of the Eagles, which is their quarterback, which is strange considering they're in the Super Bowl and their quarterback was the guy that got them there a couple of years ago as well. But I think Jalen Hurts is widely viewed as the weak link on what is otherwise a pretty damn complete team. Great offensive line, unbelievable weapons offensively, one of the best defensive lines in the NFL, a really good secondary, I guess below average linebackers, but that's kind of it. That's like the one spot that you would say they're a little weaker at. If Jalen Hurts pulls this thing off, and he is not just a passenger. Like, it's not like Saquon Barkley rushes for 250 and Jalen Hurts throws 5 passes and they win. Jalen Hurts is a part of why they win. He's a driving force behind that. How does that change, if at all, the conversation around him and how he's viewed among national NFL fans?
I mean, it has to change the narrative. There's no longer, well, Jalen Hurts isn't the guy that gets it done. It's other pieces of that team. If you beat the Kansas City Chiefs, not just in the playoffs, but in the Super Bowl, I mean, look at how people talk about Joe Burrow for beating the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. Why wouldn't you be talking about Jalen Hurts in the same spect of a team that made it to the Super Bowl twice, lost to Kansas City, and then 2 years later, he takes down Kansas City? And this is all under the precedent of this, he is the guy that's leading this team. I think I don't know if this makes him like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think you absolutely, though, are always putting him in the top 10 conversation, which a lot of people probably already have him in the top 10. I don't, because I don't know if I really trust him. But if you go out there and you put up 200-plus passing yards, if you throw a couple of touchdowns and are the sole reason why the Philadelphia Eagles can take down Kansas City, yeah, I'm going to look at you kind of the same way that I look at Joe Burrow. You can make Patrick Mahomes bleed.
Yeah, I'll have to look at him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL if he's able to get the Super Bowl and play well in the Super Bowl and be the reason that the Eagles win. Because for me, he's like in the 15 to 20 range right now. Like, I view Jalen Hurts going into this game as to what Jared Goff was when he was with the LA Rams. And Sean McVay watched that in the Super Bowl when they lost to Tom Brady and the Patriots and said, he's not our franchise quarterback. We gave him a franchise quarterback contract. He's not the guy that we can win a Super Bowl with. And that's the way I feel watching Jalen Hurts play right now. He doesn't feel like a difference maker. He feels more like a quarterback general more than anything else. A guy that is, he's fine to have, but you need a better roster around him to win anything meaningful. But if he comes out in the Super Bowl and plays really well, like he did in the NFC Championship game against the Washington Commanders, I think I'll have to look at him and say, okay, I was wrong. He is the franchise guy moving forward. Even though I know that he's got the franchise quarterback contract, he's the guy. He's a top 10 quarterback that can win you a Super Bowl, and especially in a weak NFC.
I think he's Russell Wilson. I think that's going to be how he's viewed in his NFL career. Russell Wilson was a really good quarterback, man. A really good quarterback. Went to 2 Super Bowls early on in his career, just the way that Jalen Hurts has. Got a ring. But people didn't think of Russell Wilson as the reason why they won those Super Bowl, or why they won that Super Bowl. It was the defense, the Legion of Boom, right?
Yeah.
And it was the running back with Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn was the guy that, how could you possibly throw it at the goal line when you have Marshawn Lynch in the backfield? Well, because their quarterback is Russell Bleepin Wilson. a future Hall of Famer who was really good. He led the league in touchdown passes back in 2017, threw for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in 2020. Like, Russell Wilson has been an unbelievably successful NFL quarterback. And yet, I think he was always viewed as like, yes, they have this great running game, this unbelievable defense, and yeah, they've got Russell Wilson too. And I think that is ultimately going to be the way that we view Jalen Hurts. Russell was never a top 5 quarterback in the league by most people's standards, but he was somewhere in that top 10-ish range. Here are the quarterbacks, Alex, that have made it to multiple Super Bowls in their first 5 seasons. You tell me how many of these guys you think Jalen Hurts is viewed in the same category as. Tom Brady?
Absolutely.
No.
John Elway?
No.
Patrick Mahomes?
No.
Kurt Warner? Warner won an MVP.
No. I don't remember that, but
Ben Roethlisberger? Maybe you could consider that. Big Ben early on in his career was kind of viewed the way that Jalen Hurts is, where it was, hey, that's Jerome Bettis' team. They've got this unbelievable defense. And Big Ben has also made a couple of clutch plays.
And Big Ben would have been in more if he wasn't stuck in the AFC with Tom Brady and all those guys.
So maybe you could consider him in that kind of a category at this point in his career. And then Russell Wilson is the other. And Troy Aikman, which, no, like, let's be real here. So it's really just those 3 guys, Big Ben early on, Russell Wilson, and Jalen Hurts. So I think the question becomes, does he end up going down the path of Ben Roethlisberger, where he became the driving force for those Steeler teams over time? Or does he go the way of Russell Wilson, where it's like, yeah, there's always just a cap on this. You always kind of want him to be the secondary aspect of the offense, and you prefer to build around what the running game is.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I think the Russell Wilson thing is absolutely it. Like, for Philadelphia, he could be the driving force, and I'm still going to look at this as another element of the game and say, yeah, but this was what really put them over the top. Like, when Kansas City wins, it's because Patrick Mahomes evolves in some sort of fashion, and we talked about this last week. Like, Jalen Hurts looked awesome in that Washington game, but, man, when they were bringing pressure to him, it started to get a little scarce. Yeah. Like, when Patrick Mahomes gets pressure, he adapts. And Jalen Hurts has not been able to adapt. And that's kind of why I always view him that way. Now, maybe you go out there and you put on a show this Sunday. But for some odd reason, it just doesn't stand out to me like you're going to be able to do that. But if you beat Kansas City, I personally feel like it has to put you a little bit higher up than what we're talking about, because we're doing the same thing with Joe Burrow. Like, we're doing the same thing with Joe Burrow, right?
I feel like Burrow, and this is where, like, I'm not even sure he's Russ. Like, I'm looking at Russ's numbers, and I get what you're saying about when he had Marshawn Lynch. Man, Russ had seasons where he threw for 40 touchdowns, 35 touchdowns.
Let's be fair. That was later on in his career.
Sure, but
his first few seasons, 26, 26, 20, 34, 21 touchdowns. But that is very Jalen Hurtsy.
I still don't think we've seen, like, I can remember watching Russ play, and I don't know if that, like, I remember watching Russ play and being like, yeah, maybe not a great quarterback, like maybe not one of the top 5 quarterbacks, 5 to 10 for sure. Like, I remember him always being a guy that even when he took away his running back, especially as you started to get into his career, of, man, Russ is going to make plays. And I don't see that from Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts isn't a guy that's going to beat you passing. Like, you mentioned Joe Burrow. Burrow will beat you, man. Burrow will drop back and pick you apart and get the team down the field. And I look at Jalen Hurts and I go, if Jalen Hurts has to throw the football, I don't see it. And I don't think the eye test is back.
And that's why I think it's worth noting how good he is with his legs, though. Well, yeah, Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns by year. 10, 13, 15, 14.
Yeah, I was looking at the year that he came in second to the MVP. Mahomes threw for 41 touchdowns that year, but Jalen Hurts rushed for 13 and also threw for 22 and only threw 6 interceptions.
Yeah, I think we underestimate sometimes what he does on the ground and how much of a weapon he is on the ground. I mean, this season, if you combined his rushing and passing touchdowns, he ended up with 32 touchdowns. Last year, 2023, if you combined his passing and rushing touchdowns, he had 23 through the air. He had another 15 on the ground. That's 38 touchdowns over the course of the season. It's pretty damn impressive. Now, some of that, worth noting, context, it's tush push, right?
I was going to say, that it kind of inflates
but he's
the
better
touchdown
at it than
number.
anybody.
And he's still pulling it off.
It's
like there's other guys that try it.
So I got to give him credit where it's due. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I'm not sure there's anybody individually with more on the line, more to gain in this game than Jalen Hurts. Because, T-Bone, you've been talking about it for a while. It's possible he goes down the route of Jared Goff, where Jared Goff got the Rams to a Super Bowl, but eventually the Rams were like, man, we've got to improve here. This isn't good enough. Let's go get Matt Stafford. That's going to be the way that we get over the top. I could see that with the Eagles, where 2-3 years down the road, they're like, you know what? we like Jalen Hurts. He's a good player, but he's not going to get us to the next level. We've got to find an upgrade here. I don't know who that would be, but we got to go find an upgrade and get that internal. Or he wins them the Super Bowl, and now he's a made man in Philadelphia, and he's the starter for the next 10 years, and he becomes what Russell Wilson became in Seattle, where he's a mainstay in the organization. So I think it could go in either direction. A lot of it comes down to how he plays in this game.
I think the other guy that's right up there with Jalen Hurts, like individually a lot on this, is Nick Sirianni.
Yeah,
sure.
Because if they lose this one, it's going to be 2 Super Bowls, and we know how Philadelphia is. It's going to be, man, you've been there twice, and you can't get the job done. And still, it's against Patrick freaking Mahomes. But I think Nick Sirianni is going to be up there just as much as Jalen Hurts' legacy is going to be.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think there's a lot more individuals that can gain something from the Eagles side of things, strangely, than on the Chiefs side.
Oh, yeah. The Chiefs lose. It's like, okay, we'll see you next
I'm
year.
talking about the upside. Like, a win here, it doesn't change anything for Patrick Mahomes. Now, as a team, they go down as one of the greatest 3-year stretches in the history of professional sports. So as a team, it changes everything. Individually, I don't think it's going to change the way that anybody views Patrick Mahomes if he wins this game, or Travis Kelce or Chris Jones. Like, I don't think any of them really change their place among the landscape of either their current peers or their historical peers. For the Eagles, there's a lot that can be gained here because they're first.
I think Mahomes is the one, if you even want to call it that, for the Chiefs, of like who has the most to gain. And it would just be because of that classic conversation of, oh, well, he did something Brady never did. And I don't know how much you take into that. I mean, Brady did win 7 damn Super Bowls, even though there wasn't 3 in a row. I mean, it still matters, but that's the only one for me that really has a lot, because Andy Reid, I don't know how much really changes with another Super Bowls.
He's just in the mix of the best coaches ever, which he already is.
Yeah, same with like Kelce. We all know Kelsey's one of the best tight ends ever. Yep. Chris Jones, everybody knows Chris Jones is a good player, Hall of Famer. Nothing really changes, and even the Mahomes, I don't know how much it really changes the GOAT conversation.
I agree with you. I think it all comes back to the team aspect of it. And this is why I think they focused the way that they did this year. It's no longer about the numbers for any of them individually. Like, they are just trying to win Super Bowls at this point. That's the only goal for them. And so, yes, it does look ugly at times during the regular season. None of that matters, because that's not what they're not trying to put up MVP numbers anymore. They literally do not care about that. It's all about, do we hit our peak performance come January and then into early February? Because if we do, now we're chasing history as a team. Whereas for the Eagles, it is still at, and it's not like a diss against them, but it's just the reality of where they're at with their organization currently. It changes some stuff. When you win a Super Bowl, it changes everything about your life inside of that city. Like, Jalen Hurts will become a hero there if they win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The way that Nick Foles did when he won a Super Bowl there, right? So
a statue.
It's just very much more individual based on the Eagles side of things and team based on the Chiefs side of things. All right, in 15 minutes, we're going to talk about which team in the NL Central, their fan base is most frustrated going into the 2025 season. I think there's a case for basically every team in the division. We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. Questions and answers is coming up next. Hey, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service tax line to get involved in the show. You can always check us out on YouTube as well, youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. We did get this question in from Gator in the YouTube chat. Guys, if you could build around one of the following two quarterbacks, who would you choose? Brady or Mahomes? You get them at the beginning of their career, and you get to build a team around them for the entirety of their career.
I would go Mahomes. And it's just because of what I said a little bit ago of like anything you throw at that guy, he finds a way to adapt to it. And you can't even use look at all of the greatness that he had around him because, yes, he still has had Travis Kelce, but last year they won the Super Bowl with Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman. Like,
And Rasheed.
Totally. But like, it's not like we're talking about like a future Hall of Famer wide receiver.
There was no Randy Moss on his roster.
Like he had Travis Kelce, and I'm not discounting that at all, but these were a bunch of guys that he was making impacts with. And again, anything you throw at Patrick Mahomes, he finds a way to adapt to. Not saying Brady couldn't, but I would go Patrick Mahomes.
And Brady, to be fair, back in 2004, his leading receivers on that team were David Gibbons, David Patton, and Deion Branch.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Deion Branch I heard of.
Deion Branch ended up having a really good NFL career, but I mean, there was a reason why Mike Vrabel had so many opportunities in the red zone. They just didn't have great weapons in those early years, but also Brady wasn't the same guy that he ended up becoming later on in his career. So I would go Mahomes. You guys know that. I'm also a massive homer in that regard. Brady is the only guy that I would have the conversation about, though. That guy was a cold-blooded killer, and one of the things that I think they both have in common, they were unbelievable competitors. Like, they truly did put winning above everything, and what I mean by that is what we were talking about in the last segment, where you're not just stat chasing. I think Joe Burrow is still in his stat chasing era, where he's going for the numbers, right? He really wants to be in the MVP conversation. That stuff really matters to him.
What gives that away? The fact that he's begging for his two top wideouts to come back?
I think we have now seen Josh kind of transition, and he is now into the like, dude, forget the MVP stuff. I don't even care about that anymore. I'm trying to win. Brady got there very quickly, and Mahomes is already there as well. So those are the two guys, but I would personally go with Mahomes.
Yeah, I would lean towards Brady. Pocket passer, you could never get to him, right? The ball was out of his hands quickly. We've seen at times, and I don't even think it's Mahomes' fault, but at times we've seen that. I mean, it's how Tampa Bay beat him. They got to Mahomes, right? They sacked Patrick Mahomes. You couldn't get to Brady. I don't care how bad that offensive line was. Brady got the ball out of his hands so quickly. And that's why I would go with Tom Brady. I just don't think you could get to him. Like, how am I supposed to beat a quarterback when I can't touch him? Yep. And that's why I would lean towards Tom Brady. But
you're forgetting
Mahomes is right
Super
there.
Bowls, but that's fair. The Giants won those two Super Bowls because they got to him.
You gotta remember, man. I was
2007 and 2011.
Ate him for
7
dinner.
and 11 years old, man.
Strahan ate him for dinner that one Super Bowl.
The same with the Chiefs Super Bowl against the Bucs was basically Brady against the Giants defensive line, and it's no coincidence that was Steve Spagnuolo.
How many sacks did Strahan have in that Super Bowl?
Couple. I think it was more pressure than it was like specific sacks.
See, I didn't have
those defensive lines dominated.
I have no recollection of Strahan as even like a player.
Oh, really?
He's always been a Good Morning America host in my life.
He had
funny how that works.
He had one sack and 2 solo tackles on him with 3 quarterback pressures.
Yeah, it was the pressure. They just constantly were getting in there, and Brady would get rid of the ball quickly, so there wouldn't be the sack numbers, but he was under pressure.
And he hit him twice. No roughing the passer in those days.
Yeah.
From the 314, guys, I saw a report today. I'm going to amend this speculation today about a trade involving Kyrou going to the Islanders for Noah Dobson. Would that be of interest to you?
No. Noah Dobson is awesome, by the way. For people that don't know, like Noah Dobson is legit a top pair-esque defenseman. Right shot, too, which is beneficial for this team. Only making $4 million, but little caveat here, he's on LTIR. And he's an RFA after this year, which means you're going to be paying him. But I'm not trading Jordan Kyrou because especially for a defenseman, where's your offense coming from? Because you trade Kyrou, that's 23 goals on this team right now.
What's Dobson's contract look like? I'm not doing this either way, just to clarify.
Right now it's $4 million, and he's an RFA after this season.
Okay. So you're getting up to 7 or 8 next year.
Yeah. Which, again...
So it doesn't add any cap space for you, and you lose out on the opportunity for 35-plus goals with Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah, which, again, like don't get me wrong, Noah Dobson, awesome player. Would love to have that. But if I trade a 25 or 23 goal scorer for me this year, Where's your offense coming from? And you can't say Snuggerud and Dvorsky because you don't know what those guys are right now. At least I know Kyra can get me 30 goals in a season. So, no, I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing that.
I wouldn't do it either. I actually think, like, as much as we've talked about the core over the last, whatever, it's been 3 days, Kyra to me is, like, untouchable at this point. Unless, like a
It goes
legit
back to what we said
superstar
at the
comes
time.
available.
Yeah, I'm not trading Kyrou, Thomas, these guys that the only way I'm trading them is for an obvious upgrade. The only reason I was willing to consider Kyrou in the conversations for Matthew Tkachuk is because it's Matthew Tkachuk that's available, and that guy never becomes available. So, to me, yeah, I'm not interested in moving him unless I'm obviously getting the best player in the deal. In which case, I'll trade Kyrou plus. Like, I'm willing to do that, but it's got to be for one hell of a hockey player. Young, unbelievable, superstar level talent.
Right.
That's the requirement coming back in return. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We'll get back to the NFL with an interesting quote from Joe Burrow coming up in about 15 minutes. Plus, the NFL Players Association is pushing back a little bit on the notion that there's going to be an 18-game regular season anytime in the near future. We'll let you hear that coming up in just a little bit. But next, in your opinion, which team in the NL Central is most frustrated with the direction of their organization heading into the 2025 season? We'll give you our answers on that next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So, Alex, we've talked a lot about the projection systems, whether it's Pacoda or zip. God, man, we got to work on
Yeah,
that.
we have no rhythm on that. How are we so good at Believe It or Not?
One of us has less than the other. We don't have to talk about who.
Easy over there, Mr. Flying Eagle. We can't sing words with it.
Touche. So we'll get into Believe It or Not coming up at 1:15. There was a piece that came out earlier today on Fangraphs about the biggest takeaways, basically from each division for their Zips projections. They put out today their playoff odds. It's not good.
What do you mean, man? I thought this was an 85-win team.
No, probably not. In the NL Central, to make the playoffs, the Cardinals are at 20%. To win the division, 11%. Playoffs, 20%. So
I thought 20% seems high.
One out of every five seasons, according to their projection systems, Cardinals make it to the playoffs. But when they got to their takeaways from the NL Central and the Fangraphs projected standings, they basically said, oof, like a big oof for this division because nobody's good, man. The Cubs are projected from Fangraphs to win 84 games. The Brewers 81, the Cardinals 79, the Pirates 78, and then the Reds 78. Everybody in the division, according to these projections, kind of stinks. So I wanted to ask you guys the question because I think there's a fair case for any of them. Which division team, their fan base, do you think is most frustrated with the direction of the team right now?
Mine's the Pirates. And I know that fan base is probably more like lethargic than frustrated, but when you have Paul Skeens having a season like he did and you haven't done anything to make that team better, like they just signed Tommy Pham. I think that's the biggest offseason move that they have made so far. When you've got that rotation with that high-end caliber, well, at least it's better than what the Cardinals have done, right, guys?
I guess we haven't signed
Last
anybody.
team in Major League Baseball that has not signed anybody to their Major League roster for 2025.
Last team without an offseason move. Blues the last team that has won 3 in a row. We are having a good time in St. Louis these days. But like when I have Paul Skeens and Jones, and I forget who the third guy is. Keller, thank you, that three-headed monster, and you're not giving me anything to get excited about this season, I would be pretty frustrated with what took place. Now, again, I know a lot of Pirates fans are probably numb because they know it's inevitable that Skeens is going to be gone and this team's not going to be spending any money. But, man, when you got that type of pitching, you have to at least lean into a little bit. So that would be my pick.
I think mine would be the Reds because I feel like over the last 2 or 3 years, we've gone into each offseason going, man, if the Reds start spending money, they could have a legitimate team. Like, look at Ellie De La Cruz. They've got some nice young pieces. Now, they traded one of them in Jonathan India this past offseason. Tyler Stevenson's a nice catcher. Spencer Steer was supposed to be a guy that was going to be pretty good. Oh, by the way, they've got some solid arms in their rotation. Hunter Green's a legit stud. Andrew Abbott's solid. Nick Lodella, you can kind of convince yourself you like. Graham Ashcraft. Like, man, this Reds team, and then they go out there and they like win 70 games. And like each offseason, it's the same story of, hey, they should do something. They should go out and spend like serious money, and they should go do one move. Like Pete Alonso would have been a perfect Cincinnati Red.
Dude, that would have been great. In that ballpark.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Would have been a great Pirate, too.
And it's only a 2-year deal, right? He only got a 2-year deal. And yet the Reds don't do anything. They add in like the margins, and then they go into the season.
They got a new manager. What do you want?
And add that to the frustration, right? You just bring in Terry Francona, a manager that is a win-now manager, and you still, like, I look at their offseason, everybody's like, look at how active the Reds are, and I go, active, sure, but it was kind of a whole lot of blah, shifted out for a whole lot of blah. Like, I think the Reds are the most frustrated fan base on top of their owner a couple of years ago being like, well, what else are you going to watch? We're the only thing in Cincinnati in the summer, so screw that guy. First off, I feel for you, Reds fans.
I'm with Alex on this one. I think it's the Pirates. If I'm a Pirates fan right now, I'm furious. Absolutely furious. Because now is the time when you've got to push. Paul Skeens is going to make real money in 2 years.
Oh, so we won't be a Pirate in 2 years.
Yeah, he'll be with them probably for the first few seasons of arbitration, and then they'll decide, you know what, we're not going to be able to re-sign him, so we need to go ahead and trade him. We know how the Pirates operate, and that's the way that they're going to do this. They have 2 players on their roster making more than $7.5 million. Those players are Mitch Keller making 15 and Brian Reynolds making 12. Their payroll right now, overall, for the entire roster is $82 million. For everybody, $82 million. You're telling me they couldn't get up into the Reds range of 114, which would put them at 22nd in Major League Baseball. They can't spend $100+ million, add another 25, 30 million bucks. Go. Why couldn't the Pirates be the team? Now, he wasn't going to accept the deal that he got with New York there, but why couldn't they be the team that ends up getting in on either Pete Alonso or Alex Bregman? Why not? Like, go out there and make a move.
Pete Alonso
like
made perfect sense for that team, especially
sure,
for a 2-year deal.
Go out there and do something like that. Why couldn't they have gotten in on Jack Flaherty? Hey, you know what would be cooler than having 3 great starters? 4. Those are the kinds of things that if I'm a Pirates fan, I'm like, why are we in on any of this stuff, man? Why can't we be the team that goes and does that? It doesn't make sense to me. They've got to get more aggressive because when you have this kind of an opportunity with that level player, if you told me I could have one pitcher in baseball for the next 5 years, it would be Paul Skeens right now. They have him. They won the lottery, literally and figuratively, and now they're just going out there and like blowing all their money. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, they're not blowing it. They're just trying to
Hold on.
Yeah,
it's like a mama bird, just put it on top, sit on it, keep it warm.
And the frustrating part is like every team can afford 1 star, right? Now, every team can go out and give out that 1 big contract. Now, Pirates can't go out and sign 2 Alex Bregman contracts. They can do 1.
Yeah.
Right? We saw like the Nationals do this. The Nationals are a team that's not spending a ton of money. They did this when they decided to push when they had their young core of Bryce Harper. They went out and they spent on pitching. Pirates should be the team that's spending on offense because their offense sucks. Their offense, if they had any kind of just an average offense, they would win this division. No questions asked. I think if they have an average offense, they'd win this division because of their pitching.
Can't even have a conversation about baseball. All the texts coming in right now. I didn't know this was a Pittsburgh radio station. If I wanted to listen to people talk about the Pirates, I'd go listen to the Pittsburgh radio.
No, I'm sorry they're not talking about them either.
Fair. They
talk
certainly
about
don't
the
care the way
Penguins.
that we do here in St. Louis, but it speaks to this division and the lack of any kind of urgency seemingly from any of the teams. At least the Cubs are kind of trying. Now, what they did is a classic Cardinals move where they're like, oh, well, we got Isaac Paredes for a guy that we didn't really want here anymore anyways at the deadline, and now we're going to flip him for a superstar in the final year of his contract, and it sure doesn't sound like they're expecting to re-sign Kyle Tucker, so we'll give it a 1-year try, a good old college try, and if we're not very good at the deadline or we're not really in it, we could trade Kyle Tucker at the deadline and recoup some of the value for him, or we could QO him in the offseason, whatever, but it just, there's such an opportunity here for one of these teams, whether it's the Cardinals or the Pirates or the Reds or the Cubs or hell, the Brewers, whoever, and none of them are pushing. None of them. It's baffling to me, man. You've got these coastal teams that are pushing all in this year. Meanwhile, in the Midwest, none of these teams seem to want to try. It's so frustrating.
And it wouldn't even take much, right? That's the other part that's frustrating is like by doing the whole like Tucker college try thing, you kind of won the division.
And with the Cardinals, I get it at least. Like, I understand why, given the context of where they've been over the last few seasons, the Cardinals would want to take a step back this year. I think it's probably the right move long-term for the organization. But for the Pirates or the Reds or definitely the Cubs.
Or hell, the Brewers.
Yeah, this is when you push because the Cardinals are taking a step back. And somebody on the text line said, guys, the Cardinals are the only team that really matters in this division. Maybe. I think the Cubs do to a degree as well. Yeah. They've got the fan base. They've got the money. They could go ahead and push if they wanted to. But whatever. If you wanted to say it's just the Cardinals, fine. Even more reason for the other teams to push now. As much as we get frustrated here in St. Louis, the Cardinals don't typically stay down very long. Like, they'll probably be down this year, maybe again next year. Beyond that, I think the expectation, at least from other teams in the division, is the Cardinals will eventually try to push again. And when they do, they can push more than we can. So why not take advantage of our window right now for the next 2 to 3 years and really go for it, man? Because the Cardinals have resources that the Reds and the Brewers and the Pirates simply do not. But right now, we might be able to catch them. It would be more frustrating to me this year to be a Pirates fan than it is to be a Cardinals fan. Oh, yeah. Because at least I can understand where the Cardinals are
because in 2 years, I know I'm going back into an ish show, but now I have something to get excited about, and you're not doing anything with it.
Yeah, it's strange. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes, can the Blues develop a top pair offensively, a duo, so to speak, with Holloway and Thomas? Is that the next thing they're going to try to accomplish? We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. NFL Quick Hitters is coming up next. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Time for some NFL quick hitters. Non-Super Bowl edition here, Alex. There were a few things that I wanted to get to, especially some audio that I've heard over the last couple of days. Start with Joe Burrow, who was on with a show called Breakfast Ball earlier today. If you haven't seen this, it's on Fox Sports 1. My guy Danny Parkins used to work up in Chicago, previously in Kansas City. He's now doing stuff on the morning show with Fox Sports 1. They had Joe Burrow on earlier today. And, of course, they're going to talk to Joe Burrow about the future of his wide receiver core. Because Jamar Chase is up for a contract. T. Higgins is up for a contract. Hell, even their tight end, Mike Gesicki, is up for a contract extension. Here's what he had to say when asked about potentially keeping all those guys in place.
You know, we have the cap space to get it done.
Right.
And I know, I want to make it happen. Everybody involved, Trey, T, Jamar, Mike G, we all want to stay together. And so when you have guys that are motivated like that, I think, you can get those things done.
So they said, hey, we need you to restructure. It's something you would consider, not knowing what the numbers are. You'd be willing to at least have that type of conversation to keep the core guys together?
Of course.
Got it.
So he's been saying this consistently, Alex, since the end of the season. He talked about this with reporters in Cincinnati after their season came to an end. He's talking about it now this week at the Super Bowl. He's doing a ton of interviews today, and everybody's asking him the same question, and he's putting a ton of pressure, not just on his front office, forget that, on ownership to get this thing done, because the Bengals are a notoriously cheap organization with the way that they run things.
That works out well.
Do you think they are going to be able to keep both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase? Or do you think that they will? Excuse me.
Okay, no. And I don't think they should. Like, if I'm a smart organization, I would call up Joe after that interview and say, buddy, you just threw for almost 5,000 yards and threw 43 touchdowns, and your team went 9-8. You know why? Because our defense is awful. You know why? Because we have no money to put towards it. So, no, if I'm ownership and if I'm the front office, I'm going to say, Joe, pump the brakes, man. We're trying to put together a Super Bowl contending team. We got Jamar Chase. We've got you. T. Higgins is awesome, but you know what's better? A team that can actually stop the other side every once in a while. So I don't think they will, and I don't think they should, because I hope that they're a smart-run organization that sees where their weaknesses are and say, we have to fix this before we worry about another wide receiver.
Yeah, I don't think you can keep both of them. I think you got to start allocating some finances towards that defense to really help improve it, because Joe Burrow can win with one of those guys. I mean, we've seen they can win with two when they were on their rookie deals, but I think he can win if you pay one of them. And you start to really allocate resource towards that defense. I worry that they're going to be too top-heavy offensively to where it's going to be a lot like this. Maybe you do get to the playoffs as like a 10. Maybe they'll be an 11-win season. Hey, man, defense wins championships. Ask Patrick Mahomes, right? Yeah. Mahomes really hasn't had weapons the last couple of years. He's had some nice pieces. Rice's nice pieces we mentioned earlier. Their defense won them those championships, and Mahomes played well in them, but it was the defense.
Well, look at when Burrow had success, right? Yes, they had those weapons there.
They had a great defense.
The defense is what got them to the Super Bowl. They got huge stops. Like, think back to that Chiefs versus Bengals game. It was the defense that really showed out there. And Joe Burrow came up with some unbelievable clutch moments, but it was kind of a classic Tom Brady style run where defense gets you to the end of the game. Joe Burrow comes up with just enough plays at the end to be able to get you over the top. That was the way that they were able to get to the Super Bowl, and then obviously lost against your Rams. But
suckers.
That's the formula, man. So I'm with you guys. I would not re-sign T. Higgins. T. Higgins is a really good player, and he's going to help whoever he goes to, and he's going to be worth, I think, the money that he's going to get. But when you're putting $50 million to your quarterback and then $30 million to two separate wide receivers, and then potentially, as he said, Trey Hendrickson, paying him another $25+ million as well, dude, you just run out of money really quickly. There's only so much that can go around. So I get why Burrow's doing this. He's trying to get his guy paid. It's a really good look for him. But for the organization, I do not think you should listen to this, and I don't think that's the right way to build long term. All right, next thing up, there was a lot of talk about Deion Sanders potentially becoming the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Alex.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, he went on a show yesterday and talked about his potential to be an NFL head coach. Here's what he had to say.
I know it's cute, but I couldn't coach pro ball because the way they practice, the way they go about it, I couldn't take it as a man and as a football enthusiast. And I care about the game. The game is still providing for Troy and I. So it's no way that I could allow that to happen on my watch. That would be tough.
You just said you couldn't coach pro ball. You just said that right here. Just so
I'm telling you.
She tried to have him walk it back. You sure? Did you mean to say that?
You know who you are, right?
Yeah, you know you were in talks this offseason as potentially being the next Dallas Cowboy. He's like, yeah, I couldn't do it.
You make people refer to you as coach, and you just said that. Okay.
But he's talking about NFL.
No, I know. No, I know.
I agree with him. I think he's a college coach, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Nick Saban was a college coach, right? Like, it works at that level. It didn't work in the NFL. Urban Meyer, one of the best college coaches, despite all of his issues that we talk about for the next 3 hours, but he's not an NFL coach. Sometimes your style of coaching works at one level and doesn't work at the other. The rarity is a guy like Pete Carroll, who was amazing in college and then translated to the NFL level. That is the rarity, though. Most of these guys, it either works at one or the other. I don't know what it's going to look like right now with Bill Belichick as the head coach at UNC. He was great in the NFL, one of the best to ever do it, maybe the best to ever do it. In college, I don't know how that's going to translate, but I like that Deion has a little bit of self-awareness here, and he can see my style of coaching plays better here. I couldn't do what they do at the NFL.
This is why I always thought the Dallas Cowboys thing was kind of a farce. Like, there's no doubt that Dallas was interested, but the idea of Deion Sanders trying to coach NFL players, for one, is kind of laughable, but two, going to do it with an organization with Jerry Jones, who is going to be telling him every single thing that is going to happen, and on top of it, holding press conferences. There was no way that those two egos were going to work well together.
All right, next.
I'll say I still don't think he's giving himself enough credit. I think Deion could translate to the NFL. Now, it would take him being open-minded to the idea of the practice isn't as intense. I think he could do it, though. I think Deion's proven he can coach football. And if you can coach football, you can do it at any level.
All right, next thing up here. Tonight is when the Hall of Fame class of 2025 will be announced. There are 15 finalists. We can go through these just gut reaction, right? Don't look too far into it, just gut reaction. Do you think this guy will end up getting in the Hall of Fame? Forget just tonight, but overall. Eli Manning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he shouldn't, but he will.
Wow.
Here's the Derek Jeter thing again.
Yeah, unbelievable.
He's not even Derek Jeter. Anyways, Luke
More
Kuechly.
wins against Brady than Mahomes.
Two championships.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Take that, Mahomes.
He's Nick Foles, but he did it twice. Luke Kuechly. I would say no. I don't think his prime was long enough.
Well, his career wasn't long enough.
I'd say no.
Antonio Gates? I would say yes. I think Antonio Gates is top 5 tight end of the last 20 years.
Yeah, I'd say yes.
It might take a little bit.
Jared Allen? I would say no on him.
No.
And I love Jared Allen. Terrell Suggs? I would say yes.
Yeah.
Next one up is Fred Taylor. I don't think Fred Taylor, to me, would reach that level.
I don't know if I know
Jacksonville Jaguars, Fred Taylor? Yeah, no.
I'll say no because I don't know.
You ready? Wide receiver. Torrey Holt.
Yes.
Should be. I don't know if he's going to get in, though, this time around.
He will. I think he eventually gets in. Steve Smith?
I'd say yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Reggie Wayne? I think he's all of them.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Marshall Yanda, he's an offensive guard. He is. He's a future Hall of Famer.
Fine.
Whatever you say, buddy.
Guess he was good.
Willie Anderson, yes, he'll get in. Jari Evans, I would say probably not. These are offensive linemen. You don't have to worry about it. Adam Vinatieri.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so.
Do you think he gets in tonight?
Yeah, I think he will.
I think you have to. When you think of Adam Vinatieri, you think of championships, so it's hard not to.
And then Darren Woodson and Eric Allen, those are guys that are kind of before your time, T-Bone. But I think eventually maybe they'll get in. Who do you think gets in tonight? I think this is going to be a really tight class.
Manning.
Eli, I think, will get in.
Yeah.
Antonio Gates, I think, should get in.
I think it'll be Manning,
Terrell
Gates, Suggs,
Vinatieri.
and Steve Smith, Reggie Wayne.
That makes sense.
And maybe and Vinatieri.
Yeah, I think Vinatieri gets in tonight.
And then maybe one
Marshall
of those
Yanda.
Offensive
Maybe
guys,
Marshall Yanda gets in
linemen.
with them.
Why not throw one of them
I think
in?
Vinatieri should get in, dude.
Should or shouldn't?
Should.
Yeah, I agree.
To me, he's a can't miss, gotta have it Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I agree. I know this is going to sound crazy. I think Harrison Butker might be the next
I
one
was
of those guys.
just going to ask you, do you think Harrison Butker is? Because if you think Harrison Butker is, then Adam Vinatieri absolutely is.
Yeah, I think Harrison Butker is going to get in. Think about the huge kicks that guy has made, man. Huge kicks.
Yeah.
He's one of the best playoff kickers in the history of the NFL. And Vinatieri is up there.
Does Baltimore Ravens kicker
Justin Tucker?
He's got some stuff going on now.
Well, yeah, I forget. Yeah, true.
I think yes.
That's what like
Okay,
Tucker and Butker, man, they're gonna have.
But Butker's is
cases?
just no. But there's nothing
Yeah.
with Butker off the field.
No.
That will not be taken into account. He is politically active on one side of the aisle. You cannot put that against him.
That's very different than Justin Tucker's
100%. Yeah, Justin
background
Tucker
right now.
might have had some sexual assault stuff going on.
Yeah, I
that is
agree
a
they're
very
different.
different thing than a guy saying, I support Donald Trump. Like, that's
I was more
totally
referring
separate.
to his "women belong in the kitchen" comment, but
Yeah, but he's a conservative. Like, he sees
All right.
one side
This
of the aisle.
segment needs to get to a damn break.
Just
Coming up next.
That is
we got
not
next?
something that is going to be
Coming up
held against
next,
him in his Hall
Dylan
of Fame.
Holloway could be getting an opportunity to be a new pair mate for the top line.
I want to keep going with this.
Get the hell out of here.
Go to break.
Tanner Hendrickson here. They Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they take on the Florida Panthers. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7 with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So, Alex, the Blues are going with a different look to the lineup tonight. I think this is the 300th different combination that they've had on their top line thus far.
Or 47th, but it's fine. It's fine.
How many have they actually had? Do you know?
For the top line, it's been 9 different line combinations.
Oh, my God.
It's been 9 different line combinations.
There's only so many you can have, given the fact that you have like 12 to 13 forwards on your roster.
Yeah, well, I looked at it.
That's amazing.
I looked at it because I wanted to see, how many line combinations have they had in total for their team this year? This will be the 48th different line combination. That's like 15 more than the next closest team, which had about 36 of them.
I'm no hockey guy.
32 of them.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably not good.
Yeah, no.
It speaks to the lack of success that they've had on that top line. Well, what they're going with tonight is Holloway with Thomas and Buchnevich, or at least that's the expectation going in. That's the way that they had it at morning skate.
That'll last period.
Alex, the question that I think is kind of interesting here, is this now Holloway and Thomas? Like, has Holloway earned the opportunity to be that top line guy now, and then Buchnevich is the one that ends up moving up and down depending on what happens around them or if they're having the success on any given game? Or is this just a, hey, let's throw Holloway up there, let's see what it looks like? Kind of like Kyrou was, where they threw him up there for half of the first period, and by the end of the first period, they had already gone back to what the previous lines were with Neighbors up there. How do you view this?
So, going into the game, I think this is kind of the latter of what you said, BK. I think they're going to be like, let's see what it looks like, and if it doesn't look, we'll change it. Jim Montgomery's no stranger to changing things, as we saw with that top line being switched about 2 shifts into the game against the Oilers. Long term, though, I do think they're looking at this and saying, hey, we haven't been able to find a pairing mate with Robert Thomas. We've been forcing this Pavel Buchnevich thing down their throats, and it's not working, and we've played everybody up there. I said it was 9. You've got Saad, Texier. Go through the list of people that have played up there. You know the one that has been the most successful with Robert Thomas this year in terms of expected goals? They only played 21 minutes together, and it was the first 2 games of the season. It was Neighbors, Thomas, and Holloway. They had an expected goals per 60 minutes, according to Money Puck, of 5.6.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, really good. They broke it up, though. Why? Because they were like, well, it's fine, but we don't like that combination, and they were still looking for something else. Of the top 10 lines that have played together on Money Puck, Dylan Holloway is on 6 of those top 10 in terms of expected goals percentage. Man. So to me, this is Robert Thomas is not taking advantage and making the guys around him better, so we need to put a Mr. Fix-It with Robert Thomas to see if we can get him going. And that's not Pavel Buchnevich anymore. I think it's Dylan Holloway. Dylan Holloway got that Shen Kyrie line going earlier in the season. He was playing on that third line. It was when Matthew Joseph looked really good for the Blues. I think Dylan Holloway is kind of what Ivan Barbashev used to be, where it's Mr. Fix-It. They're putting him up on that top line, and frankly, this is the line combination. You're still searching for that third one. Maybe it's Buchnevich with these 2. But to me, I think the new pair should be moving forward, Robert Thomas and Dylan Holloway.
I hope that's the case. I think Holloway's a real top-line level player at this point. I just don't know that they view it that way. I think they might view it as Holloway is really good with Shin and Kyrou. That's our trio that we really want to build around, and we just got to figure out this third guy on that line with Thomas and Buchnevich. But if it works with Holloway, great, man.
Yeah.
I think that's the best case scenario. I look at these line combinations that they have right now, Alex, going into the night. Holloway, Thomas, and Buch on the top line. Neighbors, Shin, and Kyrou. And then Bolduc, Sonny, and Joseph. I think that's the best combinations that this team currently has.
Yeah, Texier's not playing because he's sick. Frankly, I loved Texier with Sundqvist and Bolduc in that last game, but it's interchangeable. Matthew Joseph, Alex Texier, it doesn't matter on the third line. I think the top 2 lines are the best combinations you can ask for right now.
So Neighbors goes in, and he can be your puck hound. He stands in front of the net. Shin does some of that as well, kind of interchangeable there. Kyrou is your shooter, your the spacer almost, if you want to call it that. Holloway is that classic, like Jaden Schwartz level player. Thomas ends up becoming the distributor, and Buch goes and stands in front of the net. It just makes sense. They fit stylistically with one another, and it doesn't feel like you're spreading yourself too thin on any given line with those combination. So I think this is probably the way. I would like to see this get some runway up until the Four Nations face.
I would too. And frankly, after it, I would like to get this some runway up until the trade deadline. Like, just leave these lines as they are and let them run, because not to be like Debbie Downer, but it's going to be a huge mountain to climb to try and get back into this thing. So I think the more important thing for this team to try and figure out now is what pairs work best, because it obviously isn't Thomas and Buchnevich. Right now, I think the pairs that might be best for you is Kyrou and Shen and Thomas and Holloway. Or Kyrou and Shen and Thomas and Holloway, and then the others are interchangeable. And
can I ask something about that real quick? Would you consider Thomas, Holloway, and Kyrou on that top line? It puts like all of your goal scoring on one line.
And that second line is super slow, because then it's Buch, Shen, and Neighbors. It does if Buch is the two-way forward that we think he is. And I don't know if he is right now. I mean, I wouldn't mind it.
It hasn't worked with Thomas and Buch.
I actually think Holloway and Kyrou are very similar players right now, which seems crazy to say because we weren't giving Kyrou enough credit. Holloway's got an elite shot. Holloway's got speed. Holloway's forechecking. So is Jordan Kyrou. I think those two guys are kind of the identity pieces on the wings right now for the Blues, which is freaking crazy that we are saying that, because last year we were like, well, Kyrou shouldn't be on this team. I think you have to have Kyrou and Holloway on separate lines because it brings that offensive identity and forecheck identity to the line combinations. And I think if you're an optimistic Blues fan, the hope is that you can find these pairs and then you slot a Snuggerud and Dvorsky in there.
Definitely.
Because then you're pushing guys down to the third line of maybe a Neighbors, a Shen, a Buchnevich, and now you've got that depth you've been talking about.
Blues back in action tonight against the Florida Panthers. That's a 7 o'clock puck drop right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Alex will have pregame coverage beginning at 6. It's live from Enterprise Center. Alex, Florida coming in tonight to play against the Blues. It is tonight, right?
Yeah.
Okay. For a second, I was like, is it Wednesday?
No, buddy, it's Thursday.
It's weird to do a full week of radio. I feel like, when was the last time the three of us were in for an entire week of radio? It's got to have been since like November.
Yeah.
Probably because you've been out.
Long time.
I was out in December for a week.
TBK missed a couple of
died last
January.
week.
Yeah,
I apologize. I just glitched there for a second.
Hey, it's okay. I'm not gonna lie. Yesterday, until I started watching the Missouri basketball game, had no idea Illinois played last night.
We were in the hallway.
And Jackson's like, Illinois Rutgers. I was like, no, dude, that's tomorrow.
I
That's
know what
Thursday.
day it is. I got a vacation coming up.
Here we go. Okay, so Thursday night, Florida Panthers coming in tonight. It's going to be great.
Tonight.
Alex, are the Florida Panthers the model for the St. Louis Blues?
They should be. So I did my deep dive, like BK likes to do, because I was just curious. We talked yesterday about like how aggressive teams are and like how do you do this without stars. Do you know how many players are on this Florida Panthers teams that were drafted by them?
So drafted and developed internally, still on the roster today.
Yeah.
It's fewer than you'd think, because I remember they talked about this when they won the Cup. It's a bunch of guys that they brought in from the outside, either via trade. A lot of them trade, some free agency. 6?
How about 3? Yeah, that feels kind of low, but I'll go 3.
4.
Damn, I was close.
Barkov, Ekblad, Lundell, and Kulikov, who was drafted by them but then brought back in as a free agent.
Okay.
Their top 6 tonight, what you'll be seeing, consists of free agent signing, drafted second overall, trade, free agent signing.
Wow.
And the trades that we're talking about, and this is where I do think the Blues can be and should be models for it. Florida was in the midst of mediocrity for a long time. They had Barkov, they had Ekblad, and they were like, hey, we can't do anything. Then they went out there and they traded a goaltender who was drafted in the 7th round and a first-round draft pick for Sam Reinhart, who turned out to be a 50-goal scorer for them. Then they went out there and they traded a guy who scored 100 points for them but didn't really believe in, a defenseman who's good for them, and a first-round draft pick for Matthew Tkachuk. They sent a second-round draft pick for Sam Bennett, and they sent a 4th-round draft pick for Evan Rodriguez. Their top 6 was made solely off of giving up future pieces that weren't working for their team and saying, nope, we're going to be aggressive. We got the one guy we think we could build around, and we'll do the rest.
And your version of Barkov would be Robert Thomas.
Yeah.
He's not Barkov, but
last year, actually Barkov, if you look at what he's doing right now, Barkov is having a Robert Thomas season. Like, he's not performing well.
I don't know if Robert Thomas is as good as Alexander Barkov is, but that's beside the point.
Right.
Stylistically similar, like that's what you're hoping Robert Thomas can become. Your version of Sam Reinhart is basically Jordan Kyrou. Obviously, he didn't acquire them in the same way, but
Right.
that's the comparison there. I guess Carter Verhaeghe for you would be Dylan Holloway? That's the closest comp, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I can make the comp with Reinhart because Reinhart's got 50 goal possibility, and I mean, I guess it's just do we believe Kyrou can get there?
Put Kyrou at
Kyrou's kind of Verhaeghe, and then what?
You don't have Reinhart, and you definitely don't have Matthew
Sam
Tkachuk.
Bennett's kind of a Dylan Holloway. He's not a centerman, but he can play the wing, and he's 25-plus goals for you.
Okay, sure. I think Sam Bennett is more like Jake Neighbors, but neither here nor there.
Sure.
Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Reinhart, like those are the pieces that you're missing right now, which means goes back to what we've been talking about for a while. You're missing that superstar, and then hopefully Jimmy Snuggerud can be a true sniper.
Yeah.
And if you can get those two things, like Anton Lundell, that's probably Dalibor Dvorsky. Or you hope that Dalibor Dvorsky early on in his career is what Anton Lundell has been for the Panthers early in his career. Because Lundell has a lot of potential, and maybe he eventually becomes a little bit more than he's been thus far. I also think Anton Lundell is kind of the cautionary tale for Dvorsky, where it is a lot of Panthers fans thought he was immediately going to take that next
Barkov,
step.
yeah.
He was going to be Barkov, but it takes time. Still very young, and so he's more of a third-line center at this point than a top six guy. So, anyways, I do think there is a lot that you can emulate from what the Panthers have done, and it speaks to the aggressive nature with which you have to construct your roster. But none of that works if you don't have Matthew Tkachuk, man.
Yep. Well, and I look at that Matthew Tkachuk, and we're talking right now about core pieces that we're just not sure if they mesh well with this Blues team. The Florida Panthers said the exact same thing after Jonathan Huberdeau put up 100 points on Mackenzie Weegar, and they said, we're good, but we're not great. We got to go get great. And you got to give away stuff that you don't want to give away. But guess what? You bring in a Matthew Tkachuk, and you say, that guy's going to put us over the top.
Yep. You have to be super aggressive, and that's really scary to do.
Yeah.
And when you make those kinds of moves, sometimes it goes really poorly. Look at what the LA Kings did. They got super aggressive, got Pierre-Luc Dubois, which was supposed to be their Matthew Tkachuk move, and it went horribly awry for them. Now, they've been able to rebound. They make another move where they traded him to Washington, and Pierre-Luc Dubois has been really good for the Capitals, and it's worked out now for the Kings, but it took a little bit of an overhaul, like a one-year kind of retool, I suppose, a one-year pivot before they ended up being able to get out on the other side. So it doesn't always go the way that it has for the Florida Panthers.
When a superstar becomes available, and like this is the hard part because I don't know who that's going to be, but when Reinhart or Matthew
Thompson.
Yeah, no, I think we've been down that rodeo.
Get him back?
I think we've been down that rodeo
I have no interest.
before. I mean, this is just going to be the question, I guess, with Marner and Rantanen. The difference, though, is these guys were 25 and 26 years old when Florida traded for them, and you're talking about guys at 28, 29 years old if you go out there and sign them free agency.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK in 15 minutes, is there any common theme among the players that have had to settle for short-term contracts over the last couple of years? And if so, what does it say about some of the Cardinals players that they're hoping to develop over the next few years? We'll get into that at 1 o'clock. The Junk Drawer is coming up next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Let's dive into the junk drawer. So, Alex, if you had to impersonate somebody and you had to get away with it for like a month doing a job, what do you think is the career or job that you'd most likely be able to get away with that?
Like, so impersonating somebody doing their job.
Yeah, so you got to go in and every day you have taken their job and you will be the one that is doing it and you got to get away with it for a month. What do you think is you would be most likely to get away with? Because, like, if you were trying to be, I don't know, like for me, if I had to go do construction for a month, I would be found out as a fraud in the first 7 minutes of that job.
Yeah. A house would
make
crumble
more than
real quick.
Yeah.
He'd wear his hard hat backwards.
So he needs a lunch break an hour in.
They'd have me like mixing the cement. I'd be like, dude, I got like 3 more minutes in me and I got to trade with somebody else.
BK gets his hand stuck in the cement while it's driving. What happened? I don't know.
I step in it. What do I do, guys?
Now we got to redo everything.
I think mine would be I could get away with being like a chef for a month.
You think?
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
I think I
Really?
could. I think I could pull that off.
At like what kind of a restaurant are we talking here? I would assume Italian.
Probably, but I think I could do probably anything because
I think you're overstating your. And I don't mean any disrespect with this. I truly do believe that you're a good cook.
This is where it starts.
No, I think you might be overestimating your ability to do things the way that a chef would do it in a kitchen.
Yeah,
like
but
everything has to be the exact right size.
Yeah, but I
it's all
think
gotta be very consistent.
You gotta yell at people.
I think I could do that. Are you kidding me? I think after I get a couple in under my belt, I could get close to that for a month. Like I think the first couple of days I'd have to really try and lay low so I don't get posed as a fraud, but I think I could pull it off.
That's a real skill.
I've taken my cooking skills to the next level since I've had kids.
I know I could not
It used to just be conventional oven where I just
that would be me.
Put those chicken nuggets in and let's dive through. But no, I think I could pull. That would probably be the most thing I could pull off.
I feel like I could be an accountant for a month.
Really?
Oh
Like
yeah, you just show up looking like that. You're in.
Yeah, I've got the
Literally just
getting
don't
up ready to
say
go.
anything.
Now, if I was like a CPA or something, we'd have some serious problems. It's way
My
above
cousin's
head.
a CPA. He still can't do math.
Yeah,
It's fine.
My mom was an accountant, so I at least have a general idea of kind of what the job is. I think I could probably fake it till I make it for a month. That's about as good as I could do, though.
Yeah, it's
I'm
interesting.
underqualified for almost every other job in America.
Someone brought up a good point. Mine's pest control. I could pull that off.
True.
Pull that one off.
It's interesting you brought up, like, because you saw your mom kind of do it, so you have a general idea. That's where I was going, was like, I would be a teacher. I think I could pull it off for a month.
That's fair.
Because my mom was a teacher, so I have an idea of like what she did. Now, like planning everything out for an entire school year,
man.
Nah, I couldn't do that. A month, I could probably get away with it.
The reason I ask is because a 13-year-old boy was arrested at a hospital after he was impersonating a doctor.
Oh, I cannot do that.
Turned
Can't
up
pull that
wearing
one off.
scrubs and had a fake ID. Now, this did not last very long.
Oh,
he only
no,
made
really?
it until 10:30 that morning. Police were called to the hospital. They said, hey, there's somebody that is walking around in scrubs impersonating a doctor. He is not a doctor. He's 13 years old. He does have a fake ID, though. So he was arrested. Eventually, they realized this kid is 13 bleeping years old. He's just a big dummy. And so they quote, gave him words of advice.
Oh.
No further action was taken. He was not taken to jail or anything. There was no charges
Gave him a
pressed.
firm talking to.
10:30 a.m.
You mean
is
nobody
all
at-
that he ended up last?
You mean nobody at the
Couple
hospital
hours.
fell for Doogie Howser walking around, 13 years old? Oh, hey, this looks like the guy that's supposed to be in OR right now.
What do you think would be the hardest?
Oh,
job
doctor.
to-
I was say I think working in a hospital would be tough.
There's I couldn't even do the nursing side of it. Like, those people are legends. But the doctor side of it, to be able to have to, like, there's no way. I
Lawyer
don't,
would be up there for me.
lawyer would totally be up there. Yeah.
I don't think I could
Lawyer's
take
just
my
a
way
lot
through
of, lawyer's a lot of
I would look lost.
staying on top of every single item and not missing anything. I just got finished watching that American Manhunt on O.J. Simpson on Netflix. The stuff
Dude, I don't
that
need another one of those documentaries. I think I'm good.
I liked it, but mine was just because, like, it was kind of a refresher of everything that happened because I don't remember any of it. But the stuff that they had to, like, individually look at, there's no way I could pull it off as a lawyer.
Yeah, lawyer, doctor, those two I would be way up there on my list. Construction work.
Firefighter, there's no way I could do that.
no.
Having to,
Anything that's like takes real skill,
Yeah,
I'm probably out.
yeah.
well, shots fired at the accountant telling that they don't have real skills.
No, that's you know what I mean.
Wow.
Like, it is a difficult job. I'm not speaking lowly of the job. it doesn't require the same physical abilities, right? Like if I'm going to fight a fire, there's some stuff physically that requires of me. If I'm going to be a chef, there are knife skills that are required. I can put in some data into the computer. That I can do. Now, it requires intelligence and understanding of the rules and everything that would take me some time to get up on.
Watch out for that truck that's backing up, T-Bone.
No, I'm not backing anything up. I think it's a slightly different thing.
Well, this is a wild text that we just got. As someone who worked in a kitchen on a very basic level, being a chef is one of the more difficult jobs you could have. Doctor would be way easier.
Oh, I don't know if I agree with that, but
come on. Doctor's not way easier.
I think it's
would be hard.
Understated how difficult it is to be in a kitchen.
Someone said pilot, we wouldn't even be able to take off. Yeah, you're
totally.
right there.
That's
you
the
sit
one.
me in front of those with all those buttons.
No chance.
No way. Even playing video games as a long time as I have, there's no way I could do
If we're
that.
on a plane and somebody's got to land the plane and I'm the last one available that can do it.
Oh, yeah, we're going down.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going down.
We're going into the water and we're just hoping that we all end up being okay.
I give my best effort, but that's
all I
not
know
where
what to
we're
do
hoping
is you
for.
just get up there and you just pull the things back and just hope that, you land it.
He's Alex, this T-Bone on BK. Coming up in about 15 minutes. It is a Thursday. We learned that earlier today, which means that it is a Believe It or Not day. We will sing that for you and get your scenarios for us here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get your scenarios in. But coming up next, is there a common theme among the players that have settled for short-term contracts in free agency over the last few years? Talk about that, what it means for the Cardinals next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So over the last few years, we've seen these guys get into free agency, Alex, that are expecting a 5, 6, 7-year contract in some scenarios. And whether it ends up being a Matt Chapman or last year Cody Bellinger had to settle for a shorter-term deal. We ended up seeing this with Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell. And then this offseason, we're starting to see it again. Pete Alonso settles for the short-term deal. Jack Flaherty, same thing. We'll see if we end up seeing that with Alex Bregman as well. Do you guys see any themes, common themes, among the players that are settling for these shorter-term deals? And I'm not talking about, like, a few years ago, Max Scherzer had to settle for a 2-year deal. He was like 42 years old. So, yeah, of course he's settling for a shorter-term deal. I'm talking about the guys that you would typically, in a previous version of Major League Baseball offseason, expect to get those long-term deals that end up settling for short-term deals. Do you guys see any common themes among them?
I mean, mine would be power. And I don't know if it's tied, if it's mainly just looking at Pete Alonso, but if I'm a team, I'm not going long-term with Pete Alonso because if the power goes, then the player goes. 40 home runs, 46 home runs, 34 home runs, and he played the most games. He played every single game this season for the Mets. To me, if I'm a team looking at that and he won 7, 8 years, I'm going, man, you just played 162 games and you had 12 less home runs than what you had the year prior. That doesn't bode well for a 7, 8 year contract. Give me 1 or 2 years of you to see if that power stays, and then we'll just kind of go consistently short-term deals because you're not the all-around player. Like Bryce Harper is an all-around player. That's why you go out, hand an 11, 12-year deal to a player to that ilk. So for me, it would be power, specifically looking at what Pete Alonso, and I guess you could throw Cody Bellinger into that.
Yeah, and I think it goes to, like, what you're saying is if you're not a all-around player that doesn't have the sexy, analytics attached to yourself. Like Pete Alonso hits the ball fairly hard. But Cody Bellinger, I mean, you mentioned him. Sure, he hit 280 it was for 1 year, and he hit okay power. Everybody can look at, like, his exit velos and go, whoa, this is odd. Like, this doesn't feel sustainable. If you're not as a player that baseball can look at and say, there's some sustainability to you. Or if you do lose, like Pete Alonso, if you do lose power, well, at least you've got your defense there, right? Paul Goldschmidt lost his power. Still excellent defender at first base, though. That's why he's got a contract with the New York Yankees. I think that's what we're seeing in baseball. I think these teams are looking at these guys going, hey, you don't profile as somebody that's sustainable, at least for the hitters. The pitching side's a little weird. Like, I would have given Flaherty his 5-year contract. I get some of the injury questions, but he just came off an incredible season where he was a legit dude. Jordan Montgomery, his was more of overplaying his own market. Blake Snell never made sense because we all knew who Blake Snell was. He's going to be a guy that strikes out guys. Sure, he has a walk problem, but he makes up for it with his strikeout stuff, and he's always going to be a Cy Young contender. Those I didn't understand. The hitting side, I think it is hey, do you have a sustainable profile? Because Pete Alonso's numbers going down. Alex Bregman, numbers going down. It's why we don't see Bregman with that 6, 7-year contract laying on the table. I think that's what it is for the hitting side. Is there sustainability?
I don't understand the pitching one.
I don't either.
I don't see a common theme there because you could say injuries, but, like,
isn't that a pitcher?
That's all pitchers. In this offseason, Max Fried got a massive contract. So am I supposed to really believe that it's the injuries that are the problem there? I don't see it. I can't explain that one at all. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think we see this over time. Carlos Rodon, prove it again. Kevin Gossman, hey, go out there and become the player that you think that you are, and then we'll give you the contract. And so I think there might be some of that because even with Snell, right? He had that unbelievable season. Then last year proved it again. And then it's like, okay, yeah, now you can get your contract. Jack Flaherty, okay, you had a really good season. Go prove it again. And if he does this year, I think next year he probably gets the contract. So I don't think it's anything necessarily like about any of the individual places. Those are kind of case by case to me. On the hitter side of things, I think it's one-dimensional players. Matt Chapman was one-dimensional whenever he hit free agency. He was just a glove-first guy. And so you're not going to spend $20+ million a year on a 5-year deal for a true one-dimensional glove-first type of a third baseman. That's just not what people pay for. Pete Alonso, he has one tool. One. Now, it's an elite tool. He's an unbelievable power hitter. But he's just a pure power hitter. And he plays first base, so there's not much positional value defensively there. It's just pure power. Guy that I didn't mention, but he kind of fits into this as well, is Anthony Santander. Kind of a one-tool player, right? He's just a pure power hitter. Teoscar Hernandez, kind of a pure power hitter. And so some of these guys are going to get those shorter-term deals as well. I think that's what we're seeing here, is Major League Baseball, if you don't have multiple tools to provide, they're not giving you more than 3 years. It's just not really going to be out there for you. And I do wonder, as we look towards the Cardinals and we look at, okay, the guys that they're trying to develop from within right now, Mason Wynn is a guy that has multiple tools, right? He's got the glove, he's got the contact, he's got the speed. I think Lars Nootbaar, I know people get so frustrated when we talk about him because he just cannot stay healthy. You want to talk about a guy that's going to get paid whenever he hits the free agency market? That's Lars Nootbaar. People will bet on that type of a profile as long as he eventually stays healthy before hitting free agency. The guy that I really wonder about here, what is Nolan Gorman's profile? Because we've talked about him as potentially being one of those stars, right, T-Bone? Like when we talk about the potential of, hey, it's Gorman and Walker that a lot of people think have that true star potential. Okay, well, Pete Alonso, I think, was kind of a star, but baseball didn't value the way that he was a star. Is that what Nolan Gorman's going to be?
Yep, that's exactly what Nolan Gorman's going to be. To me, that's what you're hoping for Nolan Gorman. You hope you get 40 home runs in a season.
But if baseball doesn't value that, then doesn't that tell you that maybe it doesn't matter as much as we're giving it credit for? I don't know. I don't really know how to...
Kind of why I kind of wondered if they should have investigated trading Nolan Gorman this offseason.
I know you want what he brings to the table is valuable.
I think baseball values it. The problem for him is he doesn't have anything else, to your point on like Alonso, right? He doesn't get on base.
Most of these guys that hit home runs,
doesn't walk.
A lot of these guys on the top of the power market, they're guys that just hit for power. Like Cal Raleigh last year, 34 home runs, struck out 28% of the time, got on base 31% of the time. Pete Alonso, 240 hitter, 330 on base percentage. Like a lot of these guys, Teoscar Hernandez, same thing, hit 250 for the season. Anthony Santander got on base 31% of the time last year, but hit 44 home runs. That's kind of the profile that we're talking about for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I think when you look at like a guy like Nolan Gorman, I mean, if he's not going to get on base and it still remains that one-dimensional, I think where he brings that value is what you see teams do with like Joey Gallo or Jock Peterson. Do you just mash right-handed pitching, right? Because that's where his value will really become and it's not even really the regular season, it's more in the postseason, right? That's where those lefty bats really make an impact is can you become a guy that maybe you don't end up maybe you're not even a starter long-term like that. I wouldn't be shocked if you said, hey, what's Nolan Gorman's role long-term in the big leagues? I wouldn't be shocked if we said it's Jock Peterson, which is platoon bat, DH or second baseman when he's going up against right-handed pitching, but he just crushes right.
Is that a disappointment?
For the Cardinals, yeah, the way that they talked about him. Because the Cardinals clearly think he can be a star/cleanup hitter, right? Like they clearly believe it's worth giving him playing time and trading a future Hall of Famer, Nolan Arenado, because they think there's more in his bat.
And for how untouchable he was to the Cardinals.
So here's my question, though, because I think that's probably right. Now, Jock Peterson gets, $15 to $20 million every year. It's always a one-year deal because nobody wants to bet on him long-term, but it's a valuable thing to have. And I think where it gets interesting is Jock Peterson is the kind of guy that I want on a playoff team. I don't really care to have Jock Peterson on a team that might reach the postseason, but at the deadline every year, you know who is a really valuable trade chip? Jock Peterson. Because once you get to the playoffs, that's the guy I need because if I'm going up against a right-handed pitcher, that dude mashes. And so it is one of these things where I kind of feel like this is what happens with relievers as well. Relievers during the regular season are valuable. They do matter, but really where they matter is October because the game changes and now those guys become dominant. They shorten the games on the back end, and the team that typically wins the World Series is the one that had the best bullpen. So you don't want to pay them for long term, but they become the single most important thing when you get to the playoffs. And so there's this weird regular season value versus postseason value. Do I need to pay for that long term or do I just acquire them when we get to late July? And that is the thing with Nolan Gorman. His value in the regular season is there, sure. It matters that he hits 30-plus home runs if he reaches his full potential. But if you want to become a legit World Series contender, I almost feel like he is more valuable in October than he is from April through September.
Well, yeah, because what does every team want? They want power.
From the left side.
Yeah, you want power from the left side, and that's a great thing, but you got to be consistent with it, too. What's the one thing about Jock Peterson? He always finds a way to perform in October, which is why teams are willing to go after him. So on not to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but on some line of thinking, I guess that would be somewhat successful if you're Nolan Gorman because you're proving to be consistent. And you have yet to show that yet this season.
It's one skill. It's just a super valuable skill. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I always find it interesting when you see this disconnect between the way that teams value players and then the value that those players seem to have in the postseason. Like we see this in the NHL, Alex. We've talked about, hey, what kind of value would teams get if they made their goalie available via trade, right? The reason why you don't see very many goalies traded is probably because the rest of the league doesn't value them the way that they should. And yet, we get every year to the playoffs, and who are the teams that end up winning the Stanley Cup? It's the teams that have these unbelievable goalies that just stand on their head for a month and a half during the postseason. And then we get to October, and who are the teams that are hoisting the trophy over their head once we get to the end of October? It's the teams that have the unbelievable bullpen and then probably a left-handed bat that goes crazy on this unbelievable run. So it's a weird disconnect between the value of players in the offseason and what they become in October.
And I find the goalie market to be like the bullpen market, because I get what you're saying with bullpen arms of, hey, you know, they're valuable once you get to October, but how valuable are they in the regular season? I don't think you can get to the playoffs with I don't think a great bullpen is the thing that like makes you a division winner. It is the thing that can keep you out of the playoffs. Look at the Cubs last year. The Cubs ended up being like an 83-win team. They were searching all season long for bullpen help. They just had no answers in their bullpen. I think a bullpen is the kind of thing that is undervalued by baseball teams. I think it's why you're seeing so many big names still on the market right now, is because they just view it as, well, we'll figure that out when we get to October. No, that could be the reason you're not in October.
I think the Dodgers have learned this lesson.
Yeah.
I think the Dodgers saw what has happened to them in the postseason in recent seasons, because typically they don't go into that market for the
they go get the like Kopech like they did this past year at the deadline.
They'll wait until July and say, we'll fix that whenever we get to July, but in the meantime, we're going to have young guys. We'll figure it out. We'll make that thing work. Well, yeah, then they get to October, and guess what ends up being a problem for them? Every year, they've got Clayton Kershaw coming into a game in the 7th inning trying to finish out a game for them. So now they're finally learning the lesson, and what do? They get Tanner Scott. They go get Kirby Yates, and now they're bolstering the back end of the bullpen as well. It's what makes them so unbelievably frustrating. Last thing here on this, somebody on the text line said, guys, Gorman is not a good comparison for the other hitters that you're mentioning in this segment. He had a 203 average and hit 19 home runs last year. That is awful. Totally agreed. If that's what Gorman is long-term, he doesn't even fit into the criteria of the guys that we were mentioning here.
Massive bust.
In that scenario, he's just a bad baseball player that nobody wants on their team.
He is.
Forget
Joey Gallo, just searching for minor league deals.
That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is if Gorman reaches his potential, which probably looks something like the player that he was in 2023. 240 hitter, finished that season with 27 home runs, but he only played 119 games. So you're talking about a 35 home run hitter that hits about 240 for the season. That is what I think Gorman probably is. That is these guys. That's the kind of player that we're talking about here. And really then it becomes a value proposition of how do you value that? And is he more valuable to you, or is he more valuable in a trade? Like, what can Gorman get you via trade in that scenario if he does become that player this year? That's one of those things that I find really interesting as a value proposition for teams, especially at this point in their build when they're trying to figure out, especially with Cardinals, who they have Brendan Donovan and Thomas Sajaci and J.J. Weatherholt and all these guys coming up through the system that play these middle infield positions or third base potentially. I don't know what their future is with Nolan Gorman. I truly couldn't tell you right now. All right, coming up next, believe it or not, here on 101 ESPN.
This is going to be kind of rough, guys. Not going to
Why?
lie. Hey, you know how I feel. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free, flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service
Not gonna
text
get
line
anything
for
better
Believe
than
It
that
or
at the
Not.
Super Bowl.
You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are believing it or not here on 101 ESPN.
We need to get the video clip of BK and tweet it out and say "Fly Eagles Fly" from the 101 ESPN
yes.
account.
No.
Yes.
'Cause that's what I was thinking. BK is a Philly fan this weekend.
That is a great idea.
Fly, Eagles,
I think I might
fly.
do that.
I'm going to totally clip that later on.
All right, let's start out with this, boys. Believe it or not, the Missouri Tigers will end up going to the Elite Eight in basketball and make it to the college football playoff in football.
Would you be able to survive a year of that?
Dude, I don't know.
That
Can you imagine
Chiefs
when
three-peat?
the Royals end up in the World Series?
Okay,
Dude,
well,
what
that
a year.
That one's outlandish. I'm going to say not believe it.
Okay.
One of those two doesn't happen. My guess is it's more the college football playoffs than the basketball.
I'm not going to believe it. My guess is neither happen. I could see Missouri. Look, I think this Missouri team, they can get to the Elite Eight. Like we talked about, you asked, they've got some flaws, but there's nothing major on that roster that you look at and go, this is a huge problem. Now, their free throw shooting concerns me.
You wish they would be a better free throw shooting team. There are times where I'm like, I wish you would be a little better inside, whether it's defensively, especially when Josh Gray is not on the court. Wish they were better interior defensively. Sometimes they have issues with some of the rebounding, but other than that, like they're just really good at everything.
Yeah, it's just going to be hard to get to the Elite Eight, and the SEC, they're probably going to have to run through somebody through the SEC to get there, and the SEC is loaded. And then, like, the football team, like, you know, the quarterback's a big question mark. I agree with that. I just didn't live up to expectations this year. I don't trust that he could do it and get over the top next year to get to the playoffs, so I'm not going to believe it.
Believe it.
You don't believe it.
You don't believe
I think I do.
What? Hold on, pause. Every time we talk Mizzou football, you're like, this defense is going to be great. And
Amazing.
I'm like, playoff or bust. You're like, hold on. No, I'm not going to go that far.
I'm not saying that it's playoff or bust because I don't know if the quarterback's good or not. But
that's like saying a team's got a shot in the
college football this year. All the quarterbacks sucked.
Yeah,
including
and your
the
team
ones that
still didn't get in.
And your team couldn't get in.
Not this year.
And they still had a great wide receiver.
You sound like a
they've got a
Cubs
really
fan.
good one next year as well.
But their quarterback you don't know about.
I don't know, but he can run. And I think their defense might be top 10 in the country. I think they could have a legitimately elite defense. Now, I do have a little bit of a wrinkle that I don't really know what to do with. I'm pretty sure Kellen Moore's getting that job with the New Orleans Saints. I think he's going to be the next head coach of the Saints.
Ugh.
Is he bringing his brother? Because Kirby Moore is Kellen Moore's brother, and Kirby is Missouri's offensive coordinator. And if Kirby takes the job with the Saints, I don't know what Missouri's doing with their OC job. It's really late in the process to need an offensive coordinator, so that is something that I at least have my antennas up on.
Yeah, it sounds like an internal, all right, congrats, man, you get the promotion. We had no other option.
Probably.
That's always a good thing to have.
That always makes me a little wishy-washy about it. But yeah, I think Mizzou's making it to the Elite Eight, and I think they will end up in the college football playoff. Alex?
Guys, Blues do not have a second, third, or fourth round pick in this upcoming draft. Believe it or not, they acquire 2 of those 3 picks in this year's trade deadline.
Say that again?
So they don't have a draft pick in the second, third, or fourth round of this upcoming draft. Okay. So at the trade deadline, they acquire 2 of those 3 round picks.
Okay, so they'll get a pick in second, third, or fourth. 2 of those 3. I'll say not. I think they could get something for Foxa. Maybe they could get something for Suter. I don't really know what else this team is selling at the deadline. I don't think they're going to make that big move that we've been talking about at the deadline. I think that's more of an off-season move. So I'll say not believe it.
I'll believe it. I think you can get a third-round pick or fourth-round pick for one of, if not both, Fox and Suter. I also wonder, and you brought this to my attention the other night, Alex, I wonder if they'll be the third-team broker in a deal. You know, we'll take on some salary, you know, we'll eat the 50%, and then we'll take a pick for our services. Maybe that's how the Blues acquire their superstar for, like, a minute.
Alex did this.
Yeah.
Alex knew exactly what he was doing here. That's smart. That's a good thought.
Yep. I'm believing it. They will be the middleman. According to Puckpedia, between the current cap space and the deadline cap space, they are going to have about $9.2 million worth of money. And if they can ship somebody out, i.e. a Foxa, who's got $3 million, a Suter, who's got $775,
$2 million, the bonuses.
You're talking about $13, $14 million. And if you go back and look at what last year's trade deadline was, when you're the middleman, you're talking about getting somewhere between a second and a fourth round pick.
Yeah, especially if you take on multiple millions of dollars. Look at what they had to give up to be able to ship out center. Kevin Hayes.
Yeah.
Second round pick to be able to get rid of
Blue Jackets last year were the middleman for a trade that the Rangers were a part of, and they got a conditional fourth round pick that could become a third round pick. So I think you'll see a couple of those. I think they'll recoup at least two of them. And little extra onto this, I don't think they use any of those picks. I think they're all traded at the draft.
T-Bone?
Guys, believe it or not, Nolan Arenado will be traded by the time the Cardinals pitchers and catchers report to camp on Wednesday. Yeah. I'm
going to be optimistic and say I'll believe it. I think at some point in the next 2 weeks he's dealt. I'll go ahead and say sometime within the next week. If it is true, the report from earlier today that we discussed, and if you missed it, you can check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or the free 101 ESPN app. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
We gave our extended thoughts on the Arenado stuff earlier today, but Bobby Boogie, Bob Nightingale, tweeted out that Alex Bregman is still asking for a 5+ year contract. He's not taking that down despite all of these other players accepting shorter-term deals. If that's true, I do not think he's getting that from Boston, and I do think Boston will move on and pivot to Nolan Arenado as their primary trade target. So, say it gets done. Being optimistic, I say it gets done in the next week.
I'll be the pessimist and say it doesn't get done. I think there's too many hula hoops to jump through still, and I think by the time we get to position players reporting to spring training, I think it's going to be a deal that's dead in the water, and Nolan Arenado will be a Cardinal.
I'm gonna believe it. I'm gonna believe Boston's gonna pivot and make the move. Now,
I like it.
What else? What they're doing with Casas? I don't know. Not my problem. I believe it.
Let's get into this from the text line from the 314. Guys, believe it or not, Binnington is traded at some point before the start of next year.
Not believe it.
I agree.
Yeah, if you're going to trade him, you're going to trade him this past year.
Yeah. Now his value's not as high as it was last year.
And I think there'd probably be a little bit of questioning if Joel Hofer's ready to take on that workload. And you don't have a backup. So, no way.
Believe it or not, this Super Bowl will be decided by 3 points or less, and we'll get into overtime.
Oh, well, if it goes to overtime, Chiefs are absolutely winning because they'll get the coin toss.
Yeah, freeze the coin and make sure.
Or a double-sided coin. We've seen that one before.
Weighted.
Bills and Chiefs, remember?
Yep.
I'm gonna not believe this one because I don't think the overtime. I think it is a 3-point or less game. I don't think it's overtime.
I think it's 4 to 6 points in favor of the Chiefs, so I'm not believing either of these things.
Yeah, I'm not either. I think it's going to be touchdown, 10-point game, somewhere in that range in favor of the Chiefs. No overtime needed for
36-33 Chiefs.
Wasn't that what it was last time?
35-38, 38 to 35.
Okay, I knew it was really high in the 30s. That'd be fun.
That was a fun game.
I'm in on that.
Scoop and score by the Chiefs as well.
Great. There was?
Nick Bolton. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, great for my parlay.
That was a really fun, a genuinely great game. Yeah. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Chiefs fan.
That was prior to the refs helping them. That was fun. Oh, wait, no, they did.
No, they helped them.
I remember there being...
Are you being ironic right now?
I remember a pass interference call. I was like, you can't call that. And I came into the office, I said, BK's like, what's your biggest takeaway? I was like, man, that pass interference. We're not talking about the refs, okay?
Yeah,
not
BK got really mad that day.
3 years. That was really kind of the origin story. If this was a Marvel movie, that would have been the origin story.
Yeah, and then that was like the Captain America first base.
And then Travis Kelce and his media availability. He's like, I don't know why you guys keep leaning into this ref thing.
Can you imagine how annoying that would be if you were a player?
In all seriousness, I'm sure it's brutal.
Well, don't cheat to get to wins.
For sure. But when you're on the stage...
For sure, but...
When you're on the stage and you're one of the most accomplished teams in the history of the sport, you're the first team that has the opportunity to have a three-peat. First team that got the 2 and then got back for the 3rd. And the questions that you're being asked while you're on stage are about, hey, who's your favorite referee? Who do you get Christmas cards for? Come on. It's just...
That was actually a pretty funny question.
It's funny until it's asked 5 separate times at the same media availability. And at that point, it's like, really?
As Patrick Mahomes, that's got to suck. And it's Travis Kelce.
Taylor Swift or the refs. Really? This is what... Anyways.
It's got to beat
Speaking of Captain America and origin stories, you can join me in 101 ESPN this Saturday. It was well done what you did there, T-Bone. I liked that. At the St. Louis Wheel at Union Station, which will be transformed into Captain America Shield, 5 to 7 o'clock on Saturday. Come on out, say hello. It's all courtesy of the new Captain America Brave New World film. It's Saturday, 5 to 7 o'clock with myself at the St. Louis Wheel at Union Station with Marvel Studios. Captain America Brave New World. It arrives in theaters on February 14th. We are 1 week away from that. Get all the details right now at 101ESPN.com. Coming up next, how do the Chiefs compare to some of the most dominant 3-year runs we've seen in recent sports memory? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks near the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they take on the Florida Panthers. And we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. Joel Holfer looks like he's going to get the start in net for the Blues. This sports update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning dealer.
All right, so the Chiefs are in the midst of one of the best 3-year stretches that we've seen in recent sports memory. That is not up for debate. They are already at their 3rd Super Bowl in the last 3 years.
Leave it to the
They've
Chiefs
won the
guy
last 2.
to say that's not up for debate.
That is objective. Alex, who's in their company, though? Like, who are some of the other teams for you that rise up to this level? Because I go back to the early 2000s Lakers, Shaq and Kobe. They had the three-peat. You had the Heat from 2011 to 2013 when LeBron went down there. Those were some of the most fun teams that I've ever seen play. You got the Golden State Warriors. Like, NBA has had a few of these, but the NBA is known for dynasties. It lends itself with the way that, one player can truly impact the game, the entirety of the game in the postseason. And when you get 2 or 3 of them that are all-time greats together, which happens, they consolidate star power in the NBA. It just, the league itself lends itself to dynasties. It's been the history of the league for forever. What else, though, fits into this criteria? Like, in your sports memory, which probably I would assume dates back to like 2000 for you.
Yeah.
Who else fits into this criteria?
So a couple that came to mind when we were kind of throwing this around, and we're doing the 25-year period, but like the team that I'm about to say has 2 of them, the Detroit Red Wings. They have some like late 90s, early 2000s where they made it to the Cup final twice, won it once, and then lost in the conference final to the team that eventually won the Stanley Cup. But I could say the Red Wings also, from the 2007 season to the 2010 season, to where they made it to the Stanley Cup final twice, won the Cup, made it to the conference final, but in 3 straight years, they had over 100-plus points. So the Red Wings were a freaking powerhouse in those mid-2000s, but so were the Pittsburgh Penguins with Sidney Crosby. You win it twice, and the third time you lost in the conference semifinals, and then another one in the NHL world, it's the Chicago Blackhawks, where they win it twice, and one was the shortened season, but those are at least 3 hockey teams that come to mind. The main one, though, is Detroit, because Detroit was a freaking juggernaut. 3 straight years, over 100-plus points every single year, and winning the Stanley Cup twice.
Yeah, the most dominant one for me is the Warriors one that you had mentioned. Yeah. Because, I mean, you look at what they did. They not only were in the finals, they got to won the finals, got to the finals, lost, bring in Kevin Durant, but they dominated in the regular season too, right? And I know the Chiefs had their dominant record this season, but even like we looked at the Chiefs in the regular season and went, I don't know about this team, right? Like, they're finding ways to win, but is that sustainable? You had no questions about that with the Golden State Warriors, man. They were a bulldozer and would just go through teams. The one I would think about for baseball, but it is hard to throw them into this conversation because of the trash cans that they were banging, would be the Astros. I mean, 7 straight years getting to the American League Championship Series. Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a run for baseball. That's
basically 1 for 1 with what the Chiefs are doing right now. The Chiefs have gone to 7 consecutive AFC Championship games.
Yeah, they got to 7 straight. They've won 2 World Series in that stretch. They've lost in the World Series twice. Like, I think the Astros are there, but like you have to put an asterisk next to them because of the scandal that they had with their cheating scandal. But I think as we saw over time, I think it's fair to say, early on it was fair to question, okay, what is this organization without that scandal? Hey, man, they continue to get back there after dealing with the penalties from it. So I think they're there. I think they have to be there. Now, I don't feel great about saying it, but I think they're in this conversation of most dominant runs we've seen in sports in my lifetime.
Somebody on the text line mentioned the Spurs with Dunker Parker and Ginobili. The Spurs and Patriots are tough with this because they had like individual mini dynasties within the overall almost 20-year arc of being a dynasty. And if you went back and I just asked you a question of which of those 3-year stretches would you talk about as being the best, it almost becomes difficult to say which one you're choosing. Because like the early 2000s Patriots, it was pure defense and Tom Brady coming up with clutch moments, right? And then you go to like the mid 2010s, and it's this weird offense with Hernandez and Gronkowski. It takes the league by storm, and then of course Aaron Hernandez killed some people, and he goes to prison, and it changes, and then they have to alter it again. But then you get in the late 2010s, and he has that crazy comeback against the Falcons. They've got the Super Bowls against the Seahawks as well. So it's almost like multiple different iterations of the same dynasty. So I don't know if any of those individual 3-year stretches were as impressive as what we're currently witnessing with the Chiefs, even though the sustainability of it, that's really what made them both special, was the Spurs 20 years, Patriots 20 years. That's what the Chiefs are chasing right now, is not just getting to this three-peat, but 7 straight AFC championships and sustaining it for a 15-plus year run. That's what they're hoping to get to. But I think this, if you're just talking about any 3-year stretch, this to me is better than what either of those two had.
Yeah.
It's not saying it's going to be better long term, but for this 3-year stretch it is.
It's hard to argue it, too, especially when you look at the difficulty of doing this in the sport of the NFL. Like basketball, you just mentioned it, and even baseball, like it's tough. But if you have as many superstars on your team as the Astros had, and playing in a division that at least could give you the opportunity to do that. I think when it comes to football and also hockey, those are the two that's so tough to see it go in such a small window, which is why this Chiefs thing is so impressive.
Yeah, I feel like baseball, hockey, and football are the three that are the most impressive, professional levels.
Yeah.
Because college, we've seen this, right? Alabama had that unbelievable run. Nebraska in the 90s had their unbelievable run. Georgia is kind of in the midst of their unbelievable run in recent years. Clemson had kind of a mini run there where it was them and Alabama every season.
UConn basketball had just got over a run. Yeah. We'll see what they do this year in the tournament. Yeah,
right? So they might be currently in it depending on what happens because they back-to-back titles. Florida, 2006, 2007 had the back-to-back titles there as well. Nova, 2 and 3 years. So you can have this at the college level. You can have it in the NBA. It's so rare. Football, baseball, those two, and then hockey as well. We don't see this a whole lot.
And what makes it so tough in hockey and football is it's a hard cap. Right now, you can kind of manipulate the cap a little bit in the NFL by the way you structure contracts. But, I mean, you mentioned this with the Lions the other day, BK. Cap's not real until it becomes real, right? And when everybody wants their piece of the pie, then things really get tough. And that's what you see in the NHL. What makes it so tough is I think the NHL is the toughest to reach this goal because we've seen in the playoffs, like 8 seeds have gone on runs. Florida got to the Stanley Cup 2 years ago. Florida might be in their run right now. It was Tampa Bay, and now it might be the Florida Panthers.
Is it, though? Because it is the hardest cup to, it's the hardest championship to win. And yet we have seen this. The Blackhawks did it. The Tampa Bay Lightning did it. The Penguins did it, where they have sustained stretches of greatness. And this goes back for the history of the sport, right? Like you want to go all the way back to Edmonton. They did it as well. I guess kind of in football you do as well. Cowboys had it in the 90s, Patriots in the
I don't know. I think hockey's so tough because
baseball is the hardest one to sustain personally.
I think what makes baseball tougher for me, I kind of agree, and I think you're really starting to see that. And I think the Dodgers are going to be the litmus test of this because what makes it tough in baseball, to me, it's not the financial restrictions of it. Now, there are teams that do deal with that makes it tough. It's the fact that pitching's so volatile, and it's such a tough thing to ask for pitchers like the Phillies, for example. It's tough to keep asking Zach Wheeler to throw. Sure, he throws 200 innings in the regular season. Add on top another 30 in the postseason every single year. And that's why we haven't seen the repeat champion. Their pitching doesn't hold up. Now, I think the Dodgers are the litmus test of this because they keep spending crazy amounts of money to where
that's what's going to change the narrative.
I think they can erase this narrative.
Yeah, potentially.
And that's why I put baseball right now at third. I would go NHL 1, NFL 2,
I think
baseball
hockey's
3.
so tough because you also got to deal with the injuries that take place for how physical it is, which is right up there with football. But then on top of it, you're relying on bounces in that game. You know, like you're relying on bounces going your way, puck luck, which is so odd to say. Like your talent can't take over a game like in football. The talent can take over. Puck luck takes over in hockey, which to me is always tough. And maybe it's not so much getting there as it is winning 2 of 3. Sure. And that's where if the Panthers pull it off, I'd say, yeah, you're talking about Penguins, Red Wings, Blackhawks era.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing I wanted to get to, somebody on the text line brought this up from the 314. BK, it's crazy that you think that what the Chiefs are doing is better than what the Spurs did. They go all the way back to the David Robertson era. Spurs were great, very long time. Individual runs they had were better than what we're seeing with the Chiefs right now. It's just that football is bigger than basketball, and so they put more weight into what the Chiefs are doing. I don't agree with that at all. And I promise you, I'm the last person that's going to undersell what the Spurs did. I think they're kind of the forgotten dynasty. I don't understand why people overlook them. The Spurs were unbelievable for 25 years. And Tim Duncan, to me, always gets overlooked in the conversation about the 5 to 7 greatest players in the history of basketball. He should be on that list somewhere, in my opinion. But they never went to a conference finals game more than 3 years in a row. They only did that once. Other than that, it was won the finals, lost in the first round. Went to the conference finals, lost in the conference semis. Then won an NBA finals, lost in the semis again. Won the finals, lost in the semis. Like they were great for an extended period of time. Like consistently among the best in the league. But they never had an individual 3-year stretch that I can point to and say that was the team, that was the run that I would say goes up against rivals what we're witnessing right now from the Chiefs. The closest thing would be 2011 to 2013. And in that stretch, they had a loss in the conference finals, a loss in the finals, and then they won a finals. So you got one title, went to another, and then lost in the conference finals another year. So that would be like if the Chiefs in the last 3 years lost in the AFC Championship game, lost in the Super Bowl, and then won a Super Bowl. That's not comparable. Like it's that would be closer to what we've seen from the Eagles over the last 3 years if they were to win on Sunday than what we've seen from the Chiefs. Yeah. What made them great was being at that level for 20 years. That's what made it special. That's what made the Patriots special as well. But the Patriots even had more like better 3-year runs than what the Spurs did, in my opinion.
I would agree with that because I mean the Patriots never had that stretch of out in the first round or win one and then kind of dissipate a little bit, kind of fade away. I don't know who else really falls in it. Eagles is a good one.
The LA Kings kind of the one that just came to mind because the Kings were a team that got in, win the cup, missed the playoffs, got in, win the cup, missed the playoffs. Like they were a team that was so good because of Jonathan Quick and Kopitar and Dustin Brown.
Like for the Giants.
Yeah. San Fran. Yeah, that's who I was thinking. I was thinking of the Boston Red Sox too because they had, what was it? I think World Series appearance and loss. Then we're in last place in their division, and then they won the World Series, and then they were back in last place. That complete like slingshot effect that was going on with them.
I know everybody hates this team, and I get it. Chiefs fans, and I say this for myself, are unbelievably annoying about all of this.
That's true.
I totally understand why people hate the Chiefs and why people are rooting for them to lose. I did the same thing with the Patriots when they were the team that was in this position. But the way that we talk about the Patriots now and look back and we're like, man, that was unbelievable. We will be doing that about the Chiefs. So don't forget to like kind of appreciate, even if you hate it, what we're witnessing on Sunday. Because I don't know if we're ever going to see anything like this again. It may never happen again in all of our lifetimes that we see something like this. So
Patrick Mahomes fixes his face, I'll appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah, if they just I just really hope that check clears on Sunday,
as BK would do.
As long as Patrick sent those Valentine's Day cards to all the refs, I think we're going to get plenty of passer interference, or I'm sorry, roughing the passer.
Yeah. I can't wait. It'll be great.
Spurs never had the refs.
We know there's going to be a big call in the biggest possible moment, right?
Yep. And then I will send this little video to BK.
One thing that I do find interesting going into this game, just totally random aside here, I do think there's a real chance, Alex, that there has been so much attention paid to the refs and specifically calling things for the Chiefs. It very well may go in the other direction in the Super Bowl, where they get no calls in their favor. And it might be a game where they just don't call much at all and just kind of let them play.
And that's going to make people hate Mahomes even more because he's going to be whining the whole time. And then people are going to be like, shut up, you've been getting all the calls.
That's fine. But people just don't want them to get the calls. And I think there's a real chance we don't see them get many calls in the Super Bowl because of the amount of attention that's been paid to it. Dude, the head of the Refs Association put out a statement this week. Have you ever seen anything like that? Because I can't remember it since we saw the refs go on strike.
Yeah.
That was the last time that I can remember hearing anything about the Referee Association.
Sounds like somebody contact the refs and say, hey, will you put a statement out about this?
Absolutely. We got to make sure that doesn't get too much attention. Coming
up
next, the Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Hey, tune in next week as the Morning After broadcast live from Cardinal Spring Training all week long. TMA will be live from Roger Dean Stadium with all the latest news and notes from Jupiter, Florida, in the way that only TMA can. Don't miss it. Cardinal Spring Training next week on 101 ESPN. It's brought to you by CarStar, your auto body repair experts. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We spent a lot of time today on the St. Louis Blues. We talked a little bit about Mizzou and Illinois from last night as well. We also talked about the Cardinals and which NL Central team is the most frustrated going into the 2025 season. And if you missed any of those conversations, you should check them out later on today. 101ESPN.com, the free 101 ESPN app. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
All right, Alex, to finish things out today, we got to get back to the Blues. They are back in action this evening. Blues versus the Panthers. Pregame starts at 6. Puck drop at 7 right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. That top line, probably going to be what most people are looking forward to. Holloway up there getting his opportunity with Thomas and Buchnevich. What is it that you're going to be looking forward to?
I'm going to look at the offense tonight. I was just telling you guys, they've scored 2 goals or fewer in 6 straight games. Going all the way back to January 1st, they have only scored 3 or more goals in games 6 times, and 4 of those 6 were victories. So this team's offense has gone very quiet. I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing Dylan Holloway play with Thomas and Buchnevich. Florida Panthers aren't an easy team. They are coming off of a loss. That's a little dangerous if you ask me. So I'm going to be watching this offense and see if they can start to figure something out.
T-Bone, do they win tonight?
The Blues? No.
Yeah, the team that's playing on this radio station.
The team that's playing on this Wednesday evening.
No.
Thursday. It's Thursday.
Oh, okay.
buddy.
Sorry, I forgot what day it was.
All right,
This is we talked earlier this week, and let me be more specific. Tuesday after the Oilers, or Wednesday after the Oilers game.
Just close the week down.
The Blues have shown they belong in the have-nots category. The Panthers belong in the
You're going to
haves.
eat your words when they win 4-1 tonight.
Oh, so they must be starting their best goalie tonight.
Hall of Fame announcement tonight from the NFL. Blues tonight as well. We'll certainly be previewing even more of the Super Bowl tomorrow. We also have a couple of guests on here, including Mike McKenna, former NHL
Craig
goalie.
Button.
Craig Button as well, potentially Joey Vitale. It's going to be a great day for you guys tomorrow. We'll be live at the Centene Community Ice Center. You guys want to talk about Harrison Butker again before we get out of here?
Nope, close it down.
For
I'm out.
Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. here on 101 ESPN.